Good evening. The September 13th meeting of the Evanston City Council shall come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Here.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye. Here.
Councilmember Nusma.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Sufferton. Here. Councilmember Ravel.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Fleming.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
With 9 members present, we have a quorum and are ready to do the work of the city. The first item on our agenda is Mayor's public announcements and proclamations, of which there are several. The first is regarding the James B. Moran Center for Youth Advocacy's 40th anniversary, a proclamation that I issued just a few days ago. It's all a matter of the public record, so in the interest of time, I'll read portions of it. Begins, whereas the tragic death of 19-year-old John E. Cox in police custody in October of 1970 prompted the Evanston City Council to call for a local study, which revealed the inadequate legal representation of disinvested residents in Evanston. And whereas to provide high-quality, community-based legal representation to youth who came in contact with the criminal injustice system, Alderman James B. Moran established the Evanston Defender Project in 1972. The proclamation goes on to talk about the Moran Center's distinguished history of serving Evanston's youth, primarily in the form of legal advocacy, and concludes, whereas today the Moran Center continues to provide holistic, healing-centered, client-driven legal and social work services representing youth and emerging adults in the criminal injustice system, assisting individuals clear their criminal record, advocating for children with special needs in school and students facing exclusion from school, and counseling families confronting destabilizing civil legal crises. Now, therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim September 10th, 2021 as the James B. Moran Center for Youth Advocacy Day in celebration of their 40th anniversary and the significant contributions they have made in championing justice and restoring hope with and for youth and families in the city of Evanston. Congratulations to the Moran Center, and thank you for 40 years of extraordinary work. Next, we have a proclamation regarding Evanston Hispanic Heritage Month, which is shorter, and so I'll read it in full. Whereas the observance of National Hispanic Heritage Month started in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Lyndon Johnson and expanded by President Ronald Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period starting on September 15th and ending on October 15th. And whereas during National Hispanic Heritage Month, recognition is given to the millions of Hispanic, Latinx Americans whose love of family, hard work, and community have helped them unite as a people and sustain as a nation. And whereas it is important to celebrate the histories, cultures, and contributions of Latin Americans and immigrants whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America, and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped Hispanics as a people. Now, therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim September 15th to October 15th, 2021 as Evanston Hispanic Heritage Month as the official designated month for the City of Evanston's annual Hispanic Heritage Month, and call upon the people of Evanston to join together in recognizing and participating in this special observance. I'm afraid that it's probably in no one's interest for me to read that in Spanish, but I believe that Clerk Mendoza perhaps will do so during her announcements. The next item on our agenda is the honoring of the Destination Imagination participants, which is going to have to be postponed to a subsequent meeting, but stay tuned for that. And before I go on, I want to acknowledge the fact that the weekend before last was a really rough weekend for our community. Three events occurred that we all felt in our hearts. First of all, Dr. Pat Effiam passed away. She was the first Chief Equity Officer of the City of Evanston. So an employee of this organization, but also really a pillar of this community, served as senior pastor at Ebenezer AME Church. She was on the board of the Youth Job Center. She was beloved by many, and her loss means a lot to many of us. And we wish her loved ones peace, and we hope that her memory will be a blessing. Extraordinarily enough, in the same 24-hour period, we also lost Pastor Zali Webb, another pillar of our community, and another former employee of the city of Evanston as well. He was pastor of Friendship Baptist Church for decades, really a vocal advocate for youth, for peace, against violence. He was one of the founders of Evanston Own It. He was part of bringing clergy leaders together to advocate for peace and to put a stop to violence in Evanston. And he was, as I said, for 25 years an employee here at the city of Evanston. And so there are deep holes left in many people's hearts as a result of this. And again, our sympathies, our love, and our hope that we can not only be blessed by his memory, but do our best to live up to it. And then finally, my heart aches to share with you that same weekend a homicide occurred in Evanston. A young man was killed, a 22-year-old by the name of Stanley Butler Jr. on September the 4th. It's something that I think needs to stop all of us in our tracks and cause all of us to recommit to the anti-violence work that's so critical and so pivotal. There's been an arrest made. I want to thank the Evanston Police Department for their quick work in that direction. And when I speak with them, they tell me that the investigation is very much still ongoing, and they request that anyone with information share that information. But I hope we can all, every single person in this community, understand the loss that we've all collectively felt when a tragedy like that occurs. And again, I hope that we can, in acknowledgement of the gravity of this tragedy, recommit ourselves to the work of creating truly shared public safety and peace for all. So with apologies for the somber but critical discussion, that concludes my announcements for the evening. And next on the agenda is the city manager's public announcements.
Thank you, Mayor Biss. I have one announcement this evening. That is the introduction of Edith Ruiz, our ComEd representative. She's here tonight, and she has provided business cards, which are placed on your seats at the dais, and she's just going to say hello and introduce herself. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for having me here today. I just wanted to introduce myself. I started March of 2020, so just right before the pandemic hit. So I've had not an opportunity to come out and introduce myself, although it is a pleasure to serve Evanston. And as the village manager stated, Erica, you all have my business card. Please feel free to give me a call if you need anything or anything I can help you with. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes my announcements.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is communications from the city clerk.
I want to acknowledge everybody here received communications from District 65 Board President that was forwarded to everyone. And I am going to read the Hispanic Heritage Month proclamation in Spanish in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. Considerando que la observación del Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana comenzó en 1968 como la Semana de la Herencia Hispana bajo el presidente Lyndon Johnson y fue extendida por el presidente Ronald Reagan en 1988 para cubrir un periodo de 30 días, que comienza el 15 de septiembre y termina el 15 de octubre. Y considerando que durante el Mes Nacional de Herencia Hispana se reconoce a los millones de hispanos y latinoamericanos cuyo amor por la familia, el trabajo arduo y la comunidad los ha ayudado a unirse como pueblo y mantenerse como nación. Y considerando que es importante celebrar las historias, culturas y contribuciones de los latinoamericanos y los inmigrantes, cuyos antepasados vinieron de España, México, el Caribe, América Central y del Sur, y las contribuciones realizadas por personas delicadas ayudar a preservar los aspectos tangibles de la herencia que ha moldeado a los hispanos como pueblo. Por lo tanto, yo, Daniel Bess, alcalde de la ciudad de Evanston, Illinois, por la presente proclamo del 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre del 2021, el mes de la herencia hispana de Evanston, como el mes designado para el mes anual de la herencia hispana de la ciudad de Evanston, e instúo a la gente de Evanston a unirse para reconocer y participar en esta celebración especial. Thank you. That concludes my announcements.
Thank you very much, Clerk Mendoza. This brings us to public comment. Do we have a printed sign-up sheet, or has everyone signed in on the spreadsheet I have? All right, so we're going to do our best to begin with in-person public commenters. So we begin, and because of the large number of people seeking to make comment, everyone is going to be given 1 minute and 40 seconds. We begin with Mary Rosinski.
Good evening. Nice to see you guys all. I'm here on two issues. One is the interim city manager, and the second one is to analyze the TIF proposal. First of all, I'm hoping that with the interim city manager, that if you do decide that Ms. Gondrowski should be that person, I hope that part of the conditions will be that she will not be in the running to become city manager. I hope that with our next process of finding a city manager, we find someone who is not connected to the city in the sense that there are no strings attached, that they know how to manage a $330 million corporation, that they know how to bring options to the table and recognize that our residents are very important in who they need to be representing, and then they need to be telling you all the truth and presenting you all with options so that you can make the best decisions for the people that you represent. So please, if you decide to do it, let's have a real search from someone and get someone in here who knows how to deal with conflict and represent the people. The second thing is the TIF. I'm concerned with all the talk on the TIF at this point. There's a certain attitude that this somehow belongs to the Fifth Ward or Alderman Councilmember Burns, and this TIF impacts every taxpayer, every ward in this city. And if you vote for this, then you are taking on that responsibility and that tax burden and passing that on. Am I done? So I will be talking more about that later, but please do not, the meetings have been not really public. There was no Zoom. Am I done?
Your time is up, but you're
okay.
Feel free
Can I
to
just
finish
say? I just want you to know this is not a Fifth Ward TIF. This is an Evanston TIF that will divert tens of millions of dollars, and we need thorough, honest discussion. Second of all, and in light of the people that we've lost, I want to say a tribute to Barbara Janes, who was a good friend of us, and she passed away on September 3rd. Barbara, as you all may know, was instrumental in keeping the Lighthouse Landing and Harley Clark Beach public and open, and she will be missed in this town, and I hope we can get a dog park for her. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now move to the comments of people who physically signed up in person to speak in person, so you all know who you are, beginning with Rick Marsh. Well, got it. Okay, we'll go back to him then. So next is Bennett Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, members of council, fellow citizens. I recommend that you vote no, respectfully, of course, on the appointment of Ms. What's her name? The person who's supposed to be this, I don't even know her, but I know she's going to be under investigation along with Storley and Hemingway, and it would continue an embarrassment for the city of Evanston. I also respectfully request that you vote against the TIF for not only the reasons articulated by Ms. Rosinski, but also because I was at a meeting, well, the main thing is I was at a meeting in the 5th Ward, and not one citizen supported the TIF, not one. And that means that the people who are most affected by this particular TIF don't want it. And I feel that it is lacks in several areas. I won't take the time to go through all of them, but one of them is the housing impact study. That's a requirement. It was not done. The other one was the public hearing. The hearing we had here for half an hour was not a public hearing. It was people making statements, but no response. So therefore, it does not define itself as a public hearing. Finally, as
15 seconds.
All right. Finally, as a person who's been involved in electoral politics for more than 60 years, I don't know how long, there's something wrong with this thing because all TIFs have some kind of money thing in it, and it should be investigated, but otherwise we'll be embarrassed. So the other final thing is that you are public servants. Remember that. You get ego needs, and there are reasons why you feel great, and you serve us, and I appreciate it. But the key is the people elected you, you serve the people, and make sure you do that in these cases. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Tricia Connolly.
Good evening. I am here to speak about SB2. One thing I feel that, and others feel this way too, that is problematic about the choice of Council Gandersky taking the city manager position is that we state that we're plagued by a lack of morale among city staff and a state of conflict between staff and the council. In such situations, human resources best practice is to bring someone new, an outsider with no connection to either side. There are organizations that specialize in this role, including the Service Corps of Retired Executives, which has a North Shore chapter. The International City County Management Association, ICMA, has a directory of search firms which can be tapped exactly for this situation. Although hiring an outside firm will incur costs, that last year's bungled city manager search and other poor personnel decisions have ultimately resulted in far greater costs, including the loss of morale, the loss of productivity, and lawsuits. Evanston needs a fresh start. Choosing an outside candidate would signal a break with the corruption and mismanagement of previous administrations.
15 seconds.
Secondly, if you were at the TIF meeting the other night, which I know there were a few of you here that were there, it was right there before you. Residents that live in the 5th Ward were incensed. They found this unjust. They felt not just unheard, but they feel, and understandably so, as though they are not in collaboration with a plan going forward. Let's do better on that.
Thank you very much. The last person who signed up on this sheet, I don't see here, is Elliot Zashin. All right, so if Elliot is not there, then we'll go to the people who signed up online to, sorry.
I signed up to speak in person.
Yeah.
Signed up online to speak
I know, that's next, I promise. You can stay there, you're going to be next anyways. I'm just explaining the run of show. So we'll now go to those who signed up online to speak in person, beginning with Ray Friedman. And the only other person I see who's signed up online to speak in person is Gabrielle Hostele. So Gabriel will be next if they're here.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Biss, City Council, City Manager, and City Clerk. First, I'd like to thank Councilman Burns for his lively and spirited discussion on the 5th Ward TIF at Fleetwood Jourdain on Thursday. The most important takeaway was when Council Burns spoke of whether the 5th Ward TIF will be passed or not, and it'll depend on the will of the people. So why are you voting on 5 different ordinances concerning this TIF before we finish the discussions with all 9 wards and learn and understand the will of the people? You have a really bad track record of making decisions and having discussions later, or no discussions at all with residents. There are so many issues that we've not dealt with yet and have more questions than we have answers. What are we doing about Police Chief, City Manager, James Park, City Hall, Fountain Square, to name a few? Our spending is out of control with a budget crisis every year. Since I moved here, our budget last year was $320 million. This year, our budget is $300 million, and yet we had to take out $18.5 million in general obligation bonds, with $43 million given to us in ARPA funds. In the past few months, we've increased our
15
payroll.
seconds.
Thank you. By about 500,000 every 2 weeks. So our payroll has gone up about $1 million per month, and also what was budgeted. We have today $10 million in bills. Why do we have $10 million in bills? Anyhow, we have employment. We are hiring people every month, and it's out of control. So last thing I want to say. Evanston residents are the most caring, considerate, and helpful people I've ever seen. You can take advantage of all that knowledge and enthusiasm by just asking, and you don't have to pay extra for studies or consultants. Please fix these issues before we self-destruct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the last person who I have as having signed up to speak in person is Gabriel Hostelet.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. My previous 2 speakers tonight it really outlined some of the problems that are going on here in the village of Evanston. One, the last speaker mentioned about the concern of spending and why there are so much spending and very hard to meet that spending. Well, I'm going to give you one of the reasons. My company just bid a contract $20,000 less than the one that was awarded, and there was no one in that company with more qualification than me or some other members of my company. Why? Well, again, another member that spoke tonight and mentioned what is going on with the employees of the village. Why do they make decisions without being questioned the reason why they made those decisions? And in my case, I sent to the city manager or assistant city manager why they made those decisions, and I never got an answer. I have a previous
15 seconds.
previous answer, and I questioned it. I need proof because every reference they give, it was backed up with facts, and then instead I just run around answer with no facts at all to prove it why they made those decisions. And I let it go, and hopefully I can talk to the council later on. Thank you very much for allowing me to talk. I really appreciate it. I hope the things are changing for the better.
Point of privilege.
Thank you.
If I can just ask what contract you're referring to? Or is it an agenda item?
Mr. Hostelet?
I'm sorry?
Could you just state what contract you're referring to so that we can do?
Yeah, the one with for Crown School and the
So it's the landscaping contract with
Yes,
Christy Weber,
landscaping
correct?
contract, correct.
And can you name your firm for the council?
KGL Landscaping.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will now move on to those who signed up in person and then went home to speak over Zoom, beginning with Rick Marsh, followed by Elliot Zation.
Oh, Rick, you are muted. My 8th Ward resident.
Rick, it looks like you're muted. Mr. Marsh, it looks like we think that the issue might be on your end. Perhaps if you want to dial in by phone, that might address the problem? Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't. It's a weird thing because you're talking, but I can't hear you. We'll be in touch with you however we can, and in the meantime, let's move to Mr. Zation, and then we'll come back to you when the tech issue is resolved. Is Elliot in the Zoom? All right, it looks like Mr. Zation might not be in the Zoom, so while we're still trying to work on Mr. Marsh's technical issues, we'll now go to the people who signed up online to speak online, beginning with Donna Wang Su, followed by Kristen Kernan, followed by Sebastian Knowles. So, Donna, are you there?
Good evening, Mayor Biss and City Council members. My name is Donna Wang Su, and I'm a school board member for Evanston, Skokie, District 65, and would like to read a letter that was sent earlier today by our board president, Panya Chanyabudi. It is our understanding that the City Council will consider a first reading of ordinances regarding the proposed 5/5 TIF district. As part of the City Council's deliberation, City staff prepared Resolution 88-R-21 for City Council consideration and approval tonight. On behalf of the Board of Education of Evanston, Skokie, School District 65, I want to inform you that the resolution should not be viewed as encapsulating the board's support for the TIF. While the resolution contains laudable goals related to the TIF and includes many of the concerns the district has raised with city staff, it does not contain enforceable commitments. The district has specifically requested that the city and the district enter into an intergovernmental agreement related to the TIF. Those discussions began over 6 weeks ago. The city, however, unilaterally determined that a resolution was more appropriate to address the district's concerns and provided this proposed course of action with very little time for the district to react. If the intent of the resolution is to meet the district's concerns, it does not, and we ask that it be pulled from the agenda. If the city decides to move forward with the resolution, we ask that the paragraph that refers to discussions with School District 65 be removed from the final resolution, as its inclusion implies District 65 support for the TIF. Should the City Council approve the first reading of TIF ordinances tonight, the board will seek to continue good faith discussions with the city in the hope of reaching an agreement regarding the TIF to ensure that the city's goals contained in the resolution are in fact commitments and District 65 interests are considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that Mr. Marsh just logged off and logged back on, so let's go back to you, Mr. Marsh, and see if your audio works now. Oh, he just dropped off again. All right, sorry. So let's go on then to Kristen Kernan, who will be followed by Sebastian Knowles and then Bonnie Wilson. Is Kristen Kernan in the Zoom? All right, I'm told that Mr. Marsh is back again, so let's give this another shot. Are you able to speak, Mr.
Yes.
Marsh?
Can you hear me now?
You bet we can. You bet we can.
Okay, I apologize. Technical difficulties, but I just want to echo some of the other comments earlier. regarding the interim city manager. I mean, Kelly, Gandersky. Now, I don't know Kelly at all, but I do know that she was hired to lead the city's law department as a corporate counsel, city attorney back in March of 2020 and joined the city manager's office in April of 2021. So this means she was working as chief legal counsel under Erica Storley when accusations of sexual harassment were brought to the department and basically ignored, and will likely have some sort of a part in the investigation, ensuing investigation. This is just not a situation that inspired trust in the council or the city manager's office. We went through this, pretty much last year with the city manager's search. So there's a trust issue. And again, I don't know Kelly, but that's the issue that we face. And we're just trying to find some common ground where we can get to the point of better collaboration with the city. But we're still struggling with the trust issue. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. I've now knocked this glass over 4 times in the last 5 minutes.
The mayor has a drinking problem.
I'm not going to comment on what that says about me, but perhaps someone else will. We're going to go. No, I don't need more. Trust me. It's just water, I promise. Anyway, we're going to move on now back to those who signed up online, beginning with Sebastian Knowles, followed by Bonnie Wilson, and then Robinson Marcus.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and City Clerk. My name is Sebastian Knowles. I'm sure you all have heard me plenty of times before. I'm here tonight to talk about the proposed appointment of Kelly Gandersky as interim city manager. Having an interim who's involved in the independent investigation into the city manager's office brings a slew of ethical dilemmas that each council member should acknowledge and be held accountable for. Regardless of the findings of the investigation, it does not make sense to appoint an individual who might be within the scope of the investigation itself. City council should have used organizations that specialize in interim executive managers, as Tricia Connolly mentioned earlier. There are plenty of resources in our community that are available for use, and it's up to City Council to adequately utilize those resources. Again, as I mentioned earlier, every council member should explain to their constituency why they made the decision to appoint someone who's potentially under the investigation of the independent law firm that we hired. Almost 500 residents signed a petition to hire an independent interim, with 14% coming from the 5th Ward and 12.6% coming from the 2nd. If you decide to appoint Ms. Gandersky, she should not be eligible to apply for the full-time position. We must ensure that expediency will not triumph over citizen participation today and going forward during the next city manager search. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Bonnie Wilson, followed by Robinson Marcus, and then Betty Esther.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Wilson. I live in the 1st Ward. I'm here to oppose the moratorium ordinance 75-21. Here are some of the examples of how the moratorium will hurt homeowners. For example, the owner would like to rent their home to their children and build more space for their growing family, or built an ADU for a nanny, or even one of the children might be sick and needs a caregiver, and they might want to build an ADU for the caregiver. If a professor at Northwestern wants to leave for a year to go on a sabbatical and would like to rent out some of the rooms in his home, he decides it would be a good idea to build an ADU in the lower level of his home. The ADU can be rented out while they are away for a year on sabbatical. And when he returns, he can rent the room to a student at Northwestern. The city of Evanston cannot be a position to dictate what owners can and cannot do with the homes they own. I know of a situation where a buyer bought a home that needed complete renovation and is now renting the home. He put in an ADU so there would be more affordable housing available in Evanston. This owner is now paying more in real estate taxes because of the permit he had to take out from the city to renovate his home. As you know, one of the ways the assessor assesses the value of a home is by the permits that are taken out.
15
We
seconds.
face enough challenges in our housing market. Please do not add to it. I'm asking the council members to vote no on this proposal to oppose a moratorium on non-owner occupied ADUs. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Robinson Marcus, followed by Betty Esther, and then Joseph Halpern.
Hi there. Good evening to all. My name is Robbie Marcus. I'm a Fourth Ward resident and a worker owner with the Evanston Development Cooperative. Piggybacking off Ms. Wilson, I'm also speaking to encourage council to vote respectfully no on item P3, the moratorium on interior non-owner occupied accessory dwelling units. As a design builder of these units, we currently have 9 active projects in Evanston under contract at various stages of design and construction, and 0 of them are for the purpose of adding a rental unit for an absentee landlord. However, since this moratorium has been proposed, we have had Evanston residents and even current homeowner clients contact us and ask if ADUs are still legal in Evanston. For these lower cost housing units to be successfully implemented in Evanston, especially given our city's long history of not allowing them, we believe there needs to be clear advocacy and education to the public around what can be built. And by passing this moratorium, we believe that misinformation would continue to be spread, sending a confusing message to both lenders and homeowners who are mostly taking on these projects for aging parents, for themselves to downsize, for relatives with disabilities, or home businesses. We acknowledge that absentee landlords and overcrowded student housing near campus is a real issue, but we believe that this may not be a solution to these existing problems that can also have unintended consequences by constraining our city's housing supply and exacerbating existing pressures in the housing market. This is a step away from our city's proposed goals of equity and affordability, which is why we encourage council to vote no on this moratorium. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Betty Esther, followed by Joseph Halpern, followed by Ivan Holm.
Excuse me. Yes, good evening. I want to speak to SP2. I agree with the statements that have been made by many of my fellow residents. One of the things that I can share with you personally that I had with Mrs. Zendusky that will reflect on what the contractor said. Her staff people would go out, and this is in reference to inspections and zoning and giving out things that they say, okay, you do this, and this is a loan or a gift, and then later it's a loan, or okay, we will inspect this and this, okay, and the next thing that you have a big violations that you have, and in trying to aid and give assistance and work with one of the residents, Mrs. Zendersky took upon herself to send me an email, which I guess was supposed to intimidate me that I would no longer assist the resident. It was offensive, shared it with some of the council, and there was no response. I understand why they didn't respond, because it was in court, but we do not need people that is only there to issue statement trying to intimidate people. He has not worked with people, our staff, in telling them what and how they should be doing their job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Joseph Halpern, followed by Ivan Holm, followed by Darrow M.
Thank you. Mayor Biss, City Council members, and City staff. My name is Joey Halpern, and I am a member of the Evanston-Skokie District 65 Board of Education. And I'm here to read a statement that was earlier sent to all of you from our president, Anyatanya Budi. It is our understanding that the City Council will consider a first reading of ordinances regarding the proposed 5/5 TIF district. As part of the City Council's deliberation, City staff prepared Resolution 88-R-21 for City Council consideration and approval tonight. On behalf of the Board of Education of Evanston-Skokie School District 65, I want to inform you that the resolution should not be viewed as encapsulating the board's support for the TIF. While the resolution contains laudable goals related to the TIF and includes many of the concerns the district has raised with city staff, it does not contain enforceable commitments. The district has specifically requested that the city and the district enter into an intergovernmental agreement related to the TIF. Those discussions began over 6 weeks ago. The city, however, unilaterally determined that a resolution was more appropriate to address the district's concerns and provided this proposed course of action with very little time for the district to respond. If the intent of the resolution is to meet the district's concerns, it does not, and we ask that it be pulled from the agenda tonight. If the city decides to move forward with the resolution, we ask that the paragraph that refers to discussions with School District 65 be removed from the final resolution, as its inclusion implies District 65 support for the TIF. Should the City Council approve the first reading of the TIF ordinances tonight, the board will seek continued good faith discussions with the city in the hope of reaching an agreement regarding the TIF to ensure that the city's goals contained in the resolution are in fact commitments and District 65 interests are considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ivan Holm, followed by Darrow M., and then Vol Den. Is Ivan, or maybe Ivan, in the Zoom? Oh, great. Ivan Holm, can you hear us? All right, let's move on for now, at least to Darrow M., which may stand for Darrow Management. Is there a Darrow in the Zoom? No? So the next we have Vol Den, or Volante d'Enredo. Is Volante or Vol in the Zoom? All right. Next we have Dave M.
Present.
Oh, there we are. Ivan? Ivan, are you able to speak?
Yes, sir.
Well, go ahead. You have 1 minute and 40 seconds.
Oh, I just would like to, can I have a minute, please?
Yeah, we'll come back to you after the next speaker. How about that?
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is Campo E. Is Campo in the, okay. Next we have Jamie, or perhaps Jaime S. Jaime Cernaguz. All right, in that case, next we have Darlene Cannon. And if Ms. Cannon is here, she'll be followed then by Yvonne. Are you there, Ms. Cannon? Ms. Cannon? Is that you, Darlene?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Darlene Cannon, Second Ward. Good evening. I am here tonight to say by allowing Ms. Gandersky to be interim city manager, it's problematic to hire someone who is directly involved in the beach sexual assault investigation, and she will possibly be implicated. This is not only unethical, but a potential conflict of interest. Second thing, vote yes on the moratorium on the ADUs. And The real question is, why would Ms. Gandersky, an employee who's only been here less than 2 years, be chosen over Kimberly Richardson, a city employee for 10 plus years, while we continuously are professing to be using a lens of equity at City Hall? The Fifth Ward TIF is not supported by District 65, as we have heard, and Fifth Ward residents. Those funds, these funds are not needed to build a Fifth Ward school, as it was previously stated. And District 65 has publicly stated that as well. This TIF will not complete the gentrification process in the Fifth Ward and will not help Black residents. As it has been falsely stated. If the city wanted to help Black residents, they don't need a TIF. If they wanted to help the
15
Black
seconds.
residents in the city would actually do that rather than practicing performative behavior issues for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go back to Yvonne, who will be followed by Kathleen Hayes and then Carlos Sutton. Yvonne, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to show I do not support the item P3, the 6-month moratorium on ADUs. The reason why is because my parents are of age, they're elderly, and I will be taking care of them. One way that would make it a lot easier for me to take care of my elderly parents is by actually right now not supporting the item P3.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Kathleen Hayes, followed by Carlos Sutton, and then Sue Lolbach.
Hello, thank you, Mayor Bliss. My name is Kathy Hayes. I am a resident, a born and lifelong resident here in Evanston. I am speaking tonight as a former government worker who's worked with victims of sexual assault. For 56 youth in Evanston to have been sexually harassed, ignored, and lied to by the city is a little bit more than disappointing. As a mother and a grandmother, I am heartbroken over the fact that this has happened and no one thought forth to expose this or articulate this to the residents of Evanston. I'm very concerned about these abuse issues and the fact that they have been allowed to go on for so long without a mumbling word from those in charge and those who we have entrusted to watch over our youth and children. I beg that you definitely have this investigation and to make it public that we can move forward in protecting the rights of women and children within our community, especially when it comes to the issues of harassment and sexual assault. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Carlos Sutton, followed by Sue Lolbach, and then Doreen Price.
Good evening, Mayor Biss and members of the City Council and the City Manager. I would like to address SP2 and the 5th Ward TIF. I am very adamantly opposed to the appointment of the interim city manager, as it'll be a continuing record of marginalization and systematic racism that office has perpetrated on citizens of Evanston over the years. Secondly, I solicit the support of all the city council members and those that are there available on the 5/5 TIF. I admonish you all to not vote for this TIF. The proposed 5/5 TIF is not representative of what the community wants. It is imperative that the marginalized members of the 5th Ward here have a voice. We have not actually participated or in designating what is to be done with our ward. This time of all, the members of the city council affords us an opportunity to get rid of people who speak for us, and when we're here able to speak for ourselves. Do not support developers against us. Only personal gain will come from those few people participating, and it will result in gentrification and political disenfranchisement for the members of the Fifth Ward. Thank you for your consideration of this of equity and empowerment to all of Evanston voters. I appreciate you personally and conscientious that you have more respect for your constituents than you do for your contributors. Please vote no on SB2 and do not support the 5/5 TIF for the Fifth Ward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sue Lolbach, followed by Doreen Price, after whom we'll loop back for anyone who's been called on and hasn't spoken yet. But first, Ms. Lolbach.
Thank you. I'm Sue Lolbach. I work at Connections for the Homeless in Evanston and head up our coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. I'd like to say, related to the 5/5 TIF resolution, we are really excited about what's in the resolution being proposed tonight, and we're excited to see the city taking action to bring in funding that will support affordable housing and the other goals in the TIF development plan. However, we're concerned about the outcomes of so many TIFs that fail to benefit residents, and we don't want to see that happen here. We feel that the TIF development plan, as presented, is a great list of goals. However, that is not really a plan, and that the city is still lacking an overall affordable housing plan that can provide context and direction for the TIF. And while council members have expressed frustration with the amount of planning that the city does, we have actually seen very few real plans. We feel that the city needs a plan in place that defines the following: the number of affordable units of different sizes to be developed for households at different income levels, how much the city will acquire and spend in rental assistance and subsidies, how much the city will acquire and spend on home preservation for how many households, how the community will be involved in making these decisions, how contractors and other consultants will be selected, how the TIF, reparations, affordable housing fund, and ARPA money will each contribute to solving the problems, what the calendar for developing the TIF would be, and how progress will be reported. We ask that a planning process be defined now. Second, related to the moratorium on internal ADUs, the underlying problem is really that there isn't enough rental housing near the university that doesn't pit student households against non-student households. Our objection to the moratorium is that in the midst of a housing crisis, the moratorium will limit the entire community's housing options and flexibility in a way that may provide benefit only in a very small part of the community. If the community doesn't want there to be a market for the single-family homes near the university to be converted to student housing, we need to figure out an alternative, not just shut things down. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Doreen Price.
Hello. All the topics preceding me are interest near and dear to my heart. And thank you, Sue, for a good description of what affordable housing means to the community, including preservation of homes that are here. What the TIF fails to do is listen to residents in terms of keeping their homes and the extreme fear, which is very, very, very real, of losing their homes, either for some excuse or some code violation or whatever. We cannot afford that kind of uncertainty as a community when people are trying their best to recover and heal from COVID, including trauma, as we know. We need more money in social services, and the staff pushed back on Erica to go with a lower amount than Jonathan had actually mentioned in his particular polling of the community in his ward, and also other ward leaders said that there was a great need for human services investment, and we still see this de-investment mentality. So from that standpoint, I'd say that keeping the status quo in terms of the city manager's office, in terms of people who come in without that kind of background, it puts us at risk. I would say Kimberly Richardson, who I know from days with learning about equity and empowerment, and her efforts and her heart in wanting to do some good with regard to equity and social justice. I would
15
think
seconds.
that if she's not involved, I would recommend her or an outside committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our list, so I'm now going to call on everyone who's signed up and hasn't had a chance to speak, with the exception, in case you're keeping track, of Elliot Zation, who has since let me know he'll be emailing his comment to the council. So those who I called on and haven't spoken yet are Kristen Kernan, Darrow M., Vol Den, Dave M., Campo E., and Jaime S. Is any of those people, I'll read them one more time, Kristen Kernan, Darrow M., Vol Den, Dave M., Campo E., or Jaime S. In the Zoom? Seeing that none of those individuals are in the Zoom, that brings our public comment to a close, which brings us to special orders of business. Would someone like to make a motion on SP1 to enable a discussion?
I'll move item SP1, the 2021 mid-year financial report.
Second.
Councilmember Nusma moves SP1. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. City Manager Storley.
Thank you. We have Kate Lewis-Lakin, our budget manager, and Hitesh Desai, our CFO, on the Zoom call to present a presentation on the mid-year budget report. So I'll hand it over to them at this point.
Thank you, Manager Stokely. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, and I would request Kate to kind of share our short presentation. Thank you, Kate. So this is we do it every year, what we call a mid-year financial update, how we are doing in the current year. This is 2021. And the numbers are as of June 30th, which is our like a midpoint. Next one, please. The general fund, the main fund, the operating expenses. So if you look at the year-to-date revenue as of June, we are 55% of the budget. So obviously higher than our targeted 50%. Year-to-date expenses at $55.3 million. So right on target at 50%. And so the net operating surplus is around $6 million. And the fund balance is around $23.5 million, which equates to 21% of our budgeted expenses. One thing I would say on the revenue side, it's a little higher. One of the reasons is we get the property tax revenues, the first installment mostly, which is 55%. So sometimes that helps us. Next one, please. General fund revenues, and we kind of just kind of highlight few with trending high, trending low, what's going on. State use tax, 60% of the budget, obviously people still buying online, so that is trending better. I see the numbers would go down as the more and more people go to the brick and mortar store. So, and I have seen particularly the last month, I think the July, that sales tax and home rule sales tax would now go up, which is a kind of a normal trend, and use tax might drop. Income tax, 86% of the budget, and that is doing fantastic. I know the stimulus money and some of those things, but overall, yes, I feel like that, okay, by August, we would have over 100% of the income tax. So that's doing pretty good. And one thing which I would mention here, that even in 2022 budget, as we are doing, obviously, the income tax is based on the population, and we have added roughly 4,000 to our population. So that would help in some of the revenues like income tax, motor fuel tax, and which are based on the population. Now, real estate transfer tax, again, a strong 77% at the midpoint against the target of 50%. Obviously, are not much in the last quarter, but we hope that, we will, I think, most likely get to that our 100% target. Building permits, right there beyond 3/4. We hope to kind of, beat that budget numbers. And amusement tax, 174%. This is mainly because of the streaming service, which was added last year, and kind of not knowing this thing. And we were, I think, the kind of first one in the suburbs doing this thing. We kind of budgeted conservatively, but the way the numbers looked. So when you see 2022 budget, we would have kind of adjust our numbers to reflect what we are getting right now. Next, please. Major revenues on track. Again, I mentioned sales tax, basic, which is the regular sales tax, 53% budget, home rule tax, which is 50%, so we are doing good. Liquor tax, right around that at 50% mark. Even electric and natural gas utility tax, we are at the halfway mark, which is a good thing. Next one is the recreation program fees, 2/3 of the budget, but obviously, as mentioned here, in the spring, we get the money for all the registration, so obviously it's trending high because of that. And property tax, as I mentioned earlier, first installment received, second installment is delayed, and I think the due date is October 1st. So we have kind of a delayed payment of property tax second installment. And, we would kind of bring it up when we do the next quarterly reporting for that. Trending low, some of these, and these are the typical ones which would have been affected last year too because of the COVID-19, and same thing more or less now as we transition. Municipal hotel tax, just 20% of the budget. Parking tickets, it's still kind of at 40%, but it lot depends on the Northwestern and the regular traffic coming to the city of Evanston. Motor fuel tax, it has gone up compared to last year as people start driving, but still, not up to the task. And athletic context tax, obviously zero. As a new basketball season, there was nothing, and we get a big chunk from the football. So I hope that, Northwestern, as all the games go on as scheduled. General fund analysis. So this is like, where we stand. This is the main one. Revenues tied to economic activity. Obviously, yes, we kind of keeping a close track on all the economic activities and how they affect our major revenues. Income tax, as mentioned earlier, trending high. We would be, kind of make that budget in a month or so. High building permit and real estate activity. That's kind of a good sign overall, and we are kind of keeping expense within our targeted budget line. Weaknesses, and as you said in the previous screen, yes, some of those things, gasoline tax, hotel tax, athletic tax, and it lot depends on the Northwestern operations. And the high fire overtime cost, and I think that would come down, as I think we have mentioned in the next slide. Let's go to the next one. Opportunities, okay. Return of Northwestern students and football season. Football season brings a lot of money for the city of Evanston in terms of all kinds of taxes. So we'll look forward to that. The main one is athletic tax. Continued implementation of sales tax policy change for out-of-state purchases. The state government makes some changes, so we are keeping in kind of eye on that too, that how much it affects our use tax. But we haven't seen any dramatic change right now. One thing kind of which is a little early, but we see is the sales tax and home rule sales tax trending high as people go to the stores instead of online shopping. So, but we'll kind of continue to kind of monitor that. And the one thread which was kind of affected us last year, early part of this year, is the COVID-19 Delta variant, and whether it affects the overall economic activity and in particular the Northwestern football season and their operation, which could impact us a big time. Next, police and fire. Kate, would you like to kind of take it over here?
Sure. Kate Lewis-Lakin, budget manager for the city.
Kate, we're having an awful lot of trouble hearing you.
All right, it usually requires me to do this. Is that any better?
It's way better.
Okay. So police and fire overtime, the slide shows where we're at year to date. You'll see it's a different story across the two departments. The police department is quite low to their budget in overtime, showing at 36% at the midway point of the year. Fire, on the other hand, is quite high at 89% compared to the budget just midway through the year. Fire overtime is due to there were a number of vacancies at the beginning of the year, so there were savings in the regular pay line while we were incurring that higher overtime. We are expecting that pace will decrease now that those vacancies have been filled recently, and we're up to a much fuller staffing in our fire department than we've been for a couple of years. We still expect that they will exceed the budget in 2021, but we can take another look at that as we do our planning and budgeting for 2022. Police overtime, again, low due to limited summer events. That's often where our police officers incur a lot of overtime. And then again, it may increase more in this fall with football season coming back on and with the return of Northwestern students to campus. This is just a highlight of a couple of our major other funds that are not the general fund. So far, we've discussed items in the general fund. In our water fund, our revenue in our operating area is at 42% of budget. Expenses are at 44% of budget, so that fund is doing quite well to budget. We are comfortable with where that is. It's a little bit less than 50% due to the timing of water bills going out every other month. The fund balance in the water fund as of June 30th was $9.4 million. This balance is obligated mostly to planned capital repairs through the end of the year and into next year. And staff is to propose a water rate increase for 2022. The water fund as a whole will be discussed at next week's city council meeting. So we can look forward to that discussion and speak more about the water fund at that date. The sewer fund revenue was at 37% of budget, expenses at 35% of budget. Again, lower than 50% due to the timing of bills and also due to capital projects often ending up being delayed a little bit into the year. The fund balance of the sewer fund as of June 30th was $5 million. The parking fund continues to experience some challenges related to the economic activities changing after COVID-19, of course. Revenue is only at 28% of our budget, and expenses were only at 40% as of June. Unfortunately, that expense number is higher than the revenue, so our fund balance as of June in the parking fund is a negative $750,000. There's just continued low parking revenue from city garages and meters all across the city of Evanston. The city council has committed $950,000 from ARPA for capital projects in the parking fund, some of which have already needed to be started throughout the year. So this will help that fund balance come up quite a bit. And the parking fund is eligible to receive an additional $2.9 million from ARPA based on 2020 revenue loss. That's not something city council has committed to yet or is sort of decided will happen. But it is something that the parking fund is eligible based on its revenue loss to receive more of that ARPA money, if that were to be decided. We've got a couple slides now to talk about ARPA a little bit more and where we stand on it to date. So the total amount that was obligated to the city of Evanston through the American Rescue Plan funds is $43 million. So far, what's been obligated to date is about $4.6 million. $3 million was obligated to water fund capital projects, $950,000 again to parking fund capital projects, and another $700,000 to the guaranteed income pilot program. This leaves us with $38,523,000 to go. And we have a couple, just one item for discussion to present to you tonight to consider including in our next conversation about ARPA funding. And this is our 2021 Equipment Replacement Fund. So typically our Equipment Replacement Fund is an internal services fund in the city's budget. Is typically funded through a transfer from the general fund. So the general fund is the only source of revenue typically going into that fund. The requested budget for vehicle replacements has been $2 million annually, and this is to keep pace with our city's vehicle life cycles and required replacement cycles on some of our very high-use vehicles that the city has. During the 2021 budget process, the City Council decided to reduce this budget to $1.6 million, and then to fund $850,000 of that from bond proceeds. The remainder of that was funded through fund balance and a much smaller than normal transfer from our general fund. That $850,000 that was initially planned to be bond proceeds was removed from the list for the 2021 bond issue after ARPA was confirmed to be received for the city, because it was believed by the City Council and by staff that there would be money available in ARPA to use for this purpose rather than have to issue for bonds. Currently, the equipment replacement fund is also carrying a negative balance. It has fallen to $261,000 in negative. This is again due to the fund has been spending up to their committed budget, but unfortunately we just haven't been able to fund it yet, as we chose to remove it from the bonds. This is eligible to be included under the ARPA sort of revenue loss category for the general fund, as again it was the decision to not transfer from the general fund last year that is causing this, that requires us to fund our vehicles in a different way this year in 2021. So staff is seeking council direction this evening on whether or not to obligate this $850,000 in ARPA funding for vehicle replacements in 2021, or to identify an alternative funding source if not. There is further discussion on ARPA allocations scheduled for next week's City Council meeting on September 20th. So this can be a portion of that discussion, but we want to put it on your radar to begin discussion with tonight. Moving over, we've got a couple slides about the 2022 budget. So staff is working very hard right now to get a 2022 proposed budget together in time for council to begin to review it in October. And we want to tell you a little bit about what we know so far is happening in that budget. So revenues are expected to increase. This is good news as we head into the next year. Income tax, sales tax, amusement tax, especially in the streaming services area. Again, many of these taxes that we found we've done very well on in 2021, we expect to see those continue to increase in 2022. So we are working on putting together accurate projections of what that looks like and what we can confidently say we would receive next year. We also have a few savings on debt service due to the refunding of bonds and a smaller 2021 bond issue than in previous years. So that's allowing us to save a little bit on our debt service payments compared to previous years. And then our public safety pension contributions under the actuarial reports are lower next year due to having high investment returns. And that again can be a further discussion for City Council, but that is available to us at this point to consider. On the other side, there are a number of expenses that will be increasing in next year's budget. These are all on the slide personnel related. Our union employees are all receiving general wage increases as according to the current union contracts, which all go through December 31st, 2022. The total cost on this is about $1.1 million. AFSCME and FOP Sergeants unions are both getting 3% next year. The FOP Patrol unit is getting 2.25%. And then our IAFF, our firefighters union, during COVID-19, made some changes to their contract and agreed to receive a 0% increase on 1/1/2022 next year, but will receive a 5% increase on December 31st, 2022, so at the very end of next year. Health insurance costs of premiums are increasing. They typically do every year. PPO plans are increasing 4.3%, HMO plans only 1.7%. This is a total in our general fund of a $330,000 increase in costs. In the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund expense, this is our pension for our AFSCME and our non-union employees, those who are not in either the fire pension or the police public safety pension. The city contribution percentage, the amount that the city has to contribute of someone's salary for each employee, has come down for 2022 compared to 2021. So this is actually offering us a savings of about $539,000. This again is due to the fund seeing high investment returns last year. So we do not have to contribute as much as a city next year for our employees. And then the last piece of it about what will be being added to the budget is that 26 positions were held vacant in the 2021 budget. This amounted to $2.5 million. These were positions that the city very much wanted to be able to fill, that we find crucial to our operations, but due to the economic constraints of COVID-19, it was decided that these would be held for 1 year in the 2021 budget. We are looking at adding many of these back into the 2022 budget and are in discussions with staff about which of those are the correct set to propose. But other vacancies are becoming increasingly hard to fill. We're seeing this across the city, that certain vacancies have been hard to fill and are causing challenges in terms of operations, though they are causing other budget savings. So we are looking at all our vacant positions very closely and trying to get the best set together that makes the most sense for our city operations and for our budget in 2022.
Kate, could I ask you to stop on that last slide just for a second?
Yep.
All right, so I just wanted to point out that as we look to prepare the 2022 budget, if we do nothing, costs increase every year. Wages go up, cost of goods go up, health insurance goes up. If we don't fill the 26 positions we held vacant last year, there's $1.4 million in costs that we have to come up with. And the only revenue sources that the city has is taxes, fees, and fines. So as we discuss this, after Kate finishes, I just want to outline that those are our three options. Costs will increase every year no matter what. We have taxes, we have fees, and we have fines. None of those three revenue sources are popular. The other option we have is a reduction in services. And as we recall the 2020 budget or 2021 budget that we put together, not only did we hold 26 positions vacant, we also eliminated several other positions. So the cutting has already happened pretty severely. And now we find ourselves in a position where, looking at next year, we already have $1.4 million in increased costs just for the cost of doing business without an increase in the cost of goods. We have, luckily, a reduction in IMRF, which is going to help us. But we also have to think about how we're going to fund those additional positions and make sure that we have a budget that accurately reflects the services that the community needs and desires, balanced with the available revenues that we have. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we get closer to budget season, but I just wanted to point that out. So thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Erica. Speaking of budget season, our next slide is just our budget calendar. So going over what are some of the key dates to look forward to, mostly in October and November related to our budget. Monday, October 11th is when we expect the proposed budget to become available on the city website. Monday, October 18th, staff would come to City Council and present that proposed budget at the public meeting for the first time. In mid-October, we plan to hold a Spanish language budget town hall. The official budget public hearing will be held at City Council on October 25th. This budget public hearing is sort of the state-required official one that is given certain notice about, and that we have to serve attest to the state that we have held this budget public hearing. However, at all of these meetings, City Council meetings where the budget is discussed, we will of course receive public comment during those meetings as well. November 8th is our Truth in Taxation public hearing at City Council. This is again a state-required sort of specific public hearing, but the tax levy and the budget will be up for discussion at a number of City Council meetings where public comment will be received. And then, of course, throughout October and November, typically staff will attend ward meetings to discuss the budget at the request of each council member, and we use those opportunities to again receive further comment from the public, as well as be able to provide that information about the city's budget in smaller settings. Typically, City Council has adopted the budget just before Thanksgiving. That this year would be November 22nd. If they choose not to do so, they can carry it into December, but the tax levy filing deadline is December 28th, and budget approval deadline is December 31st. So again, we usually hope to pass the budget in the late November meetings there, so that we have time to get those all filed and set to go by the end of the year. And that wraps up our presentation here. I can leave up the budget calendar or pull down the video, pull down the share when requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I just wanted to also mention that there was a referral made by a council member to look at the property tax levy for next year as it relates to preparing the budget. The memo that was requested as part of that was a 5-year look back on property taxes. That is included in the packet under this agenda item.
Thank you. So we'll now go to questions from council members, beginning with Council Member Braithwaite, followed by Fleming, and then Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my comment was earlier because for the slides that Hitesh was presenting, I didn't see any numbers, and then for the second half, we did see numbers. So I won't take up any more time, and I assume as we get deeper into this, we'll start to see the numbers flashing again in a way that we can start to think more broadly. I also, thank you, City Manager, I wanted to be able to reference the conversation that we started at AP&W that started as a referral that will snowball into budget conversation. So I just made 3 points, which is we'll get more numbers later, we'll have more information to make more informed discussion, and as I was just sharing with Council Member Kelly, I know everybody has their own different methodology to this budget, and a lot of it for me is informed by residents in terms of setting priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Councilmember Fleming.
One clarifying point. So you mentioned that the referral that was made and the memo was requested is in the packet?
Yes, it is in the packet. It is attached to the agenda item for this agenda item.
Okay. So, and then my other question, had to do with the calendar that's up there. So the Spanish language town hall, Ray's gone. He always talks about the public hearings and how there's not really like a discussion. So historically, have we not done like a regular, like an English language town hall before? I'm trying to remember, like when is the time for citizens? I know we have ward meetings, but if everyone doesn't have one or what have you, for citizens to actually have a conversation with us, more like a town hall. Because we don't really do that at the budget hearing, right?
The budget hearing would be the time when City Council is all together and could receive those comments. We can schedule other meetings as well. We've varied year to year on what the other town halls may look like around the budget. This is the schedule we've come up with this year.
So I would like to suggest, and I know we're in COVID, so it's a little different, but if we could do, at least just one regular town hall, so people, whether they can make their ward meetings or not, have to do a lot with their own calendars, so that there's another time for them to have a discussion with city staff and ask questions that they may not, get to necessarily hear the answer at the hearing we have here at City Council.
Okay.
Do you envision that as a town hall that City Council would participate in? That would be a City Council meeting, or is this a town hall just for the residents, no City Council
I think a town hall for the residents. I know obviously we can't all gather, but at least assuming it's going to be on Zoom or whatever, we can still hear total feedback. I just know if people are relegated to just their ward meetings, everyone has them at different times, and people might not be able to make it. And then, if they come to the hearing and they're giving their comments where there's no, there's no dialogue, Kate can't answer questions necessarily as they come to the podium.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it'd be really beneficial and shouldn't be too hard to organize. Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I know these are, I'm not looking for answers to this now, but I think we really need to start considering this moving forward. We've seen both last year and this year a parking fund and motor fuel tax funds take a hit, and I think as we're preparing for a cleaner environment with alternative modes of transportation, I think it's time to start really looking 5, 10 years down the line to see how we can start to wean ourselves off of those sources of revenue or find replacements for those sources of revenue, because I think what has happened the last 2 years is going to be the future of our city's finances. So I think we need to start getting a handle on that now and building up toward alternative sources of revenue. One question so I saw one of the first slides said that the general fund balance is about 23 million plus. Do we know what roughly it is now? Because I remember, so Hitesh.
Yes, Councilmember Reed. These are the numbers as of June. It might be a little low because what we call is we have the 55% of the property tax. So when we have the property tax money, obviously we trend higher. And then there is a dry time. And particularly what happens in the previous year, this time the cycle is a little bit different. The last quarter is typically what we call a dry spell, where we don't get the property tax money, but we have a lot of expenses, particularly with the winter right around November, December. So over time, costs related to the snow removal and others. So, but I think we expect to kind of close the year with some operating surplus for 2021.
So you don't. So right now it's at 23 million, which would put us quite a bit over our. Is it the 16 million goal or is it 18 million goal?
16.66.
18%.
2 months of operating expense.
I'm sorry, Hitesh. Can you repeat?
Oh, sorry. No, our goal is the city council has adopted 16.66%, which is equivalent to 2 months of operating expense.
Which is $18 million, right?
Right.
Okay.
But I would caution that, as I mentioned, that this fund balance would likely go down just as happened every year. It is nothing new, as I said, we would get the property tax by the 9th month. So generally we are done with September. Yeah, this time more likely it would be done by October and then November, December, where we would have some snow removal cost and all that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. What percentage do you think the budget typically goes? The reserve is drawn down in that last quarter. Is it?
I mean, it could be like $1.5 million to 2 million because there will be obviously personal expenses which stay there. The other thing which happens is typically in the last quarter, depending on we have to see the cycle. There are 3 payrolls in one of the months, and which would be additional $2.5 to $3 million too. So just that payroll alone would be $2.5 to $3 million plus any snow-related overtime, and which could be depending on how many snow events and whatnot.
So we're looking at about $3 million. Okay.
$3.5 million, yes.
$3.5 million. Okay, and I just want to note that would keep us well above our reserves. We're seemingly fairly healthy here as far as our meeting our fund balance goals. And we back in May when I raised this, we were very worried about falling below that balance for a number of reasons, including making the beaches free. But I'm glad that even with what we've done, we've been able to keep a strong reserve balance, and it seems as though we're going to finish out the year well above our 16% goal and well above our 18 million in the bank goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would any other council members like to ask questions about SP1? Seeing none, we're ready to move on. I just want to make one quick announcement. We do have, we have had in this building for a long time and now have across the city a mask mandate for indoor spaces. So I just want to ensure that everyone here please wear their mask and cover nose and mouth. I know it can be frustrating, but there are a number of breakthrough cases now with the Delta virus, and obviously we don't mandate that the public be vaccinated to come be heard here, and so we want to make sure we're keeping everyone safe to the extent possible. Thank you very much for your compliance. And that brings us to SP2. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding SP2? Councilmember Reed?
I just have a procedural question about SP2. Our council rules, and I say this just because of what this would mean as far as limiting members' abilities, but our council rules say that we are to receive, I feel as though we should have received, that the council should have received this agreement 5 days before this meeting, according to 18.11. And so I'm just curious if, I don't see it in my email, and so I'm just curious if that happened.
No, I think it was sent out on Thursday, which would be 4 days ago. So that sounds, let me look at 1811. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So
it certainly can't appear on the agenda. I'm just wondering if it should have the special order of business designation, which is just, it would limit folks if someone wanted to hold it. So I think we certainly can move forward just with the understanding that it didn't meet the criteria for a special order of business.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's correct. Councilmember Nguyen.
I was going to move the resolution.
Go ahead.
Yes. I move Resolution 89R21, authorizing the appointment of an interim city manager for the city of Evanston.
Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen moves SP2. Councilmember Revelle seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Kelly, followed by Councilmember Reed, followed by Councilmember Fleming.
So I am concerned that we weren't given this earlier and following the rules. I mean, just in terms of being able to contemplate the contract. I mean, there is a clause in there, there's a clause in there that seems to me is already in our rules regarding a vote in terms of termination, and that to me should be, but regardless, I really feel that we should have been noticed with this, at least 5 days ahead of time, and we weren't. It just came out with a packet. So, I mean, this is such an important position. I don't think we should be, I think we should be following the rules with this. I mean, this is a very weighted moment in Evanston's history with a lot of transition, and anyway, I'd ask that we hold this. So that we as a council have the appropriate time to weigh in that we should have had.
Councilmember Kelly moves to hold.
I don't know if, did you move to hold it?
You said you requested. I interpreted that as a motion. Is that a motion or no?
Well, anyway, I'm not sure. I might be doing this wrong. I am concerned that we weren't given the time to review this properly, and so I don't know if the hold would be the appropriate way. Anybody can.
Well, so Councilmember Reed's point was, and I believe he's absolutely right, that 18.11 says this can't really be a special order of business because it came out 4 days ago, not 5 days ago. I think he's correct on that. And so I think because of that, I think he's, and I would certainly welcome a correction from our Corporation Council, but I think the interpretation that this is not subject to the special order of business's protection from holds would be correct. And so then it would be in order to hold it, is my understanding.
So your point, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, just a point of order. So your point is that this then becomes a regular item on our agenda tonight that we can vote on or vote to hold, or move to hold.
Yeah, so I guess I would say we have two choices given the correct observation that Councilmember Reed made. One choice is to simply treat this as a regular order of business, which is holdable. And the other is for someone to move to suspend the rule, Rule 18.11, which a 2/3 vote could suspend that rule and allow this to still be heard as a special order of business. I would love to hear from the Corporation Council, though, since she's a lawyer.
Good evening, members of the council, Mayor Biss, City Manager Storley. So as far as Deputy City Attorney Michelle Ozuribo. So as far as 18.11, what it says is that special order of business may be placed on the agenda of a council meeting with 5 days prior notice sent to the city council via electronic mail. It also states on here that a special order of business can be placed on the agenda at the request of the mayor or majority of the city council in open session of the city council. So I guess my question would be, are you saying that is it the council's position that you did not receive the 5 days notice?
I mean, they didn't. They got it on Thursday. There's no question about it.
But we've seen the contract.
So
We've seen the essence of what we had discussed up until now.
We never saw this is not my issue, but we did not see the contract until the packet came out. Unless maybe some people did. I did not see the contract till the packet came out.
So how did it get on the agenda would be my question.
Well, I didn't.
I requested that it be put on the agenda, and I'll own it. I didn't remember the 5-day restriction in Rule 18.11.
Well, Mayor Biss, I think that's what I'm trying to say. So 18.11 has either or. So the last sentence allows a special order of business can be placed on the agenda at the request of the mayor. So that would comply with the rule without the 5-day notice. It says it may be placed with the 5-day notice. And then it says a special order of business can be placed there at the request of the mayor. So it sounds like here we're in compliance with 18.11 based on the second portion of it.
So notice has been fulfilled.
Understood. Okay. Okay. So the next speaker then is Councilmember Reed.
I'm sorry. What? Okay. Cool. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mayor Biss. I want to get clarification on what your determination is. So, as the chair, my understanding, I'm looking at Rule 18.11 now. It says it may be placed on the agenda of council meeting with 5 days prior notice sent to the. It doesn't seem like it's an either or. That is the condition for it to be a special order of business if there isn't a majority vote of the council. So if the mayor wants to unilaterally place something on the agenda, that's when the 5-day notice kicks in. Otherwise, the council can, by a majority vote in open session at a meeting like this, place it on the agenda. So I'm just curious, was your determination that this is a regular order of business, or? So what I heard from the Corporation Counsel was sort of the opposite of what you just said, that she indicated that those two sentences are parallel tracks. And just to bring everyone up to speed here, I think your point is the first sentence with the 5 days in it isn't much of a track at all because it doesn't say how the special order of business is placed on the agenda. So I think in light of the ambiguity and the question that we have before us, we should move forward as though this is a regular order of business, in an abundance of caution and also an abundance of courtesy, frankly, to the council, given the importance of the issue. So I would entertain a motion to hold this if that is if such a motion were made. All right. So I will make that motion to hold, as not to belabor this any further, but I do hope that Ms. Ganderski can be present at our next meeting when we adopt this. I said I hope that Ms. Ganderski can be present at our next meeting when we adopt this. But I will move to hold this.
Councilmember Reed moves to hold this item. Is there a second?
I think before we second the hold, that it would be important for two things. So there was a reason why you put it on for special orders of business, and there is a trigger in terms of when our current city manager, when the resignation date triggers. And so I want to be mindful, because I know that we have some other items to tend to, but let's be cognizant of that, right? So if we're going to hold it, what is that date? And right now, excuse me, next meeting?
So,
Monday.
Well, and that would, yeah.
so we could,
I mean, just
If-
so everybody's
if the
clear,
hold-
it's not
so-
like you're going to change your vote between now and then,
So-
but just as a matter of function, so we can continue our operations without disruption. Perfect.
Yeah.
Whoever hold, Councilmember Reed, thank you. Oh, Councilmember Nguyen. Can you hold it to 9:20?
Next Monday.
Next Monday, thank you.
That's our next meeting.
That's our next meeting.
isn't that how holds automatically work?
That's how holds work. It's just held automatically to the next regular meeting.
We
That's
just
the
want to call the
mechanism.
date out so there's no confusion. I'm
So
just looking
if the
for-
hold, so there's been a motion to hold by Councilmember Reed, there's been a second from Councilmember Kelly. If that hold ultimately prevails, then this would be on the agenda a week from today. And, you know, I have a tremendous amount of agreement with your point about continuity, but given that September 20th is still well before October 8th, I don't think it creates an urgent issue. So the Deputy Corporation Counsel wanted to speak.
Just to chime in one more time. So right now, this item is still considered a special order of business. Are we moving to change it? Because right now, with it being a special order of business, it currently can't be held, even if it can be stricken with noncompliance with 18.11. However, right now, as a special order of business, it would not be able to be held because of 18.12.
There you have it.
Right. I'm accepting the interpretation that it's simply not a special order of business because it was out of order for a special order of business to be placed on the agenda under these circumstances. And that then generates a situation wherein the hold is allowable. So there's been a motion for hold in a second. There are several people waiting to speak, but before that I have to ask, is there a motion to overrule the hold? So there's no such motion, so then we go to Councilmember Fleming. And just to be clear then, that means the hold prevails. We'll be voting on this in a week, and so given the time of day and the length of the agenda, I would respectfully request brevity from the subsequent speakers since there's not going to be
Point
a
of order, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah,
The
first.
hold
Sorry.
is not debatable.
What's that?
A hold is not debatable. The issue
Right.
is now,
Officially tabled, or
All right,
held.
okay, so that then means that those who have, so the hold is not debatable, the hold occurs, and then those who requested to speak are requesting to speak on an issue that's no longer on the table, no longer before us.
That is correct.
Point of order?
Yes?
Since we're getting all hung up on technicalities, our meeting next Monday is actually a special council meeting, not a regular council meeting.
but it's been on the agenda for months.
It has been on the agenda for months, but Alderman Ravel, Councilmember Ravel brings up an important point. If you're going to move to hold it, it's to the next regularly scheduled council meeting, which is the 27th. If you wanted to do this by the book, you would table it to a date certain, being September 20th, which would be next Monday.
That's what happens when.
All right, well,
Point of order, would the maker of the motion to hold be willing to have a substitute motion?
to table until the 20th?
I don't really have a problem with that.
All right, then I would
It
move.
also, is there an issue with it occurring on the 27th? It still gives us plenty of time before our October 8th deadline.
It gets, but it.
There's no issue with it, it's just, a week is a long time, that gives plenty of time to think about it. I think next week's agenda, because it's an unusual meeting, is likely to be shorter than a typical one, and there is a kind of continuity and stability argument for doing this in a way that gives time for folks to think it over and have, public digestion, but also is subject to that desire, still expeditious. So my preference would be to do it next week rather than in 2 weeks.
So I'm happy to withdraw the hold and make a motion to table this until our next meeting, which is a special meeting on September 20th.
Second. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councilmember Reed withdraws his motion to hold, moves to table SP2 to September 20th. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I do just want to echo, I think what Councilmember Kelly said, which is one provision in this contract that I'd like to see changed is, we removed the hold. That I'd like to see changed is it's written into the contract about the removal of a city manager, which is the 7-vote threshold. That exists in our rules, and I think that is best, that power is best vested in our rules rather than in this contract. So I would like to see that provision struck. And I'm also would love to have Deputy City Manager Gandersky here as well at the next meeting.
All right, thank you for that. And I would ask if there's any other discussion on the motion to table to a date certain rather than on the underlying contract. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Gravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
On an 8-1 vote, the motion carries, and this item is held and will be on the September 20th agenda. Thank you. That brings us to item number. That brings us to the consent agenda. Before I open it up to council members, there are a few things that I'm going to pull off the consent agenda. A 29, 30, 31, and 32 are all items for which a council member has requested suspension of the rules for introduction and action. So we'll have to handle those separately. And then interestingly, as I understand it, items A33 and 34 are duplicative of one another. So I'll remove item A33 from the consent agenda. Is there anything else that folks would like removed from the consent agenda?
Yes, I would like A14 removed from the consent agenda. Yes, A14.
Is your mic on, Councilmember?
Yes, I must not have it close enough. I'd like A14 removed from the consent agenda.
Okay.
Item A1, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
A1.
Also, A19 failed in committee.
Yep.
So A19 failed in committee. Great. Anything else?
Also,
P3, please.
What did you say, Councilmember?
P3.
Okay, P3.
I'm also curious, and I'd certainly support it and want to see it move forward. But we did, when we passed, I'm sorry, is it A28 in committee? It was for introduction when it was listed in committee. In committee, it was listed for introduction and not for action.
And that's correct. That's how it appears on the agenda here.
No, I get here it's appearing for introduction. I'm saying in committee, and so I would think that it wouldn't move from committee to council until it's been passed at committee for action, as opposed to for introduction.
Clear what he's saying.
That's.
I don't understand. What is he talking about?
That's not my understanding of how things operate, but as you pointed out last week, Councilmember, I don't sit on committees, so I could be wrong about that.
I didn't hear what you said.
Councilmember Reed said that an ordinance that requires both introduction and action here at council also requires both introduction and action at a committee prior to an introduction vote at council, and therefore A28 that passed out of committee for introduction isn't yet ripe to be at council.
Where is A28? I have A26.
And I'm not necessarily saying there is a rule that says that. What I'm saying is that it was listed on our agenda for introduction, and when I voted for it, it was under the impression that it wasn't yet coming here. It wasn't for action, which there are plenty of items where we do list it for action, and that's when it moves forward to council. And so that was just my confusion there.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, all items appearing before this council that when their ordinance changes to the city code require 2 readings in front of the council, not 1 reading in front of a committee and then 1 reading in front of the council. So all ordinances come to the city council for introduction and then again for action. So if they're moving through a committee, they're being introduced at the committee and then they're being introduced at council, which is how we have the ordinance for the sale of city property, which was introduced at council last time, and you made the suggested revisions. We've revised them and put them in the packet for tonight when it's up for action.
So introduce in committee tonight, introduce at council tonight, action for council next time.
Next time, and no more committee here. The single committee vote is adequate.
I guess just as a practice in the future, we should list it for action in the committee, so it's clear that it's going.
No, it's not.
So I think we should have an offline conversation about the most, we should certainly ensure that we have a completely standard way of writing things down, and we can decide offline what the most clear way is and be very direct with both ourselves and the public about what these things mean.
Well, I would like to remove 828 then.
Okay. Anything else to be removed from the consent agenda? Councilmember Kelly?
I'm sorry, did we remove A24 through 27?
No. Would you like to?
Yes.
Okay.
A24, 25, 26, and 27?
All right. So what I have so far is A1, A14, A19, which failed, A24 through 33, and P3. Is there anything else that folks want removed from the consent agenda?
Nope.
Going once?
I'm sorry. Manager Storley just said, and I can't see why I'm missing it, but that the resolution regarding the sale of city property is on here, and why am I not seeing that?
Yes, it's an ordinance.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's on
33 and 34.
It's A33.
Yes.
But it's
okay.
accidentally
And
duplicated.
Yeah, so it's A34 actually, because 33 has been pulled off, and there'll be A34.
Okay, and I'd like to remove that from the consent agenda.
A30.
Okay. So now I have A1, A14, A19, A24 through 34, and P3. Is there anything else? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to pass the whole consent agenda except for A1, A14, A19, A24 through A34, and P3.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen moves that the whole consent agenda except for A1, A14, A19, A24, A25, A26, A27, A28, A29, A30, A31, A32, A33, A34, and P3. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
On a 9-0 vote, that portion, the aforementioned portion of the consent agenda passes. So it's going to be a busy night now for Councilmember Braithwaite. Would you like to make a motion regarding item A1?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I'd like to move item A1. Staff recommends the approval of the Evanston BMO Harris ending in the period of June 26 in the dollar amount of $6,495.41. That's for action.
Second.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves item A1. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
I abstain.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
On a vote of A, voting in favor, and one abstention, item A1 passes. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion regarding item A14?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. I'd like to, give me 1 second to get on the page. Item A14, which is approval for change order number 1, contract with Christie Weber Company Landscape Maintenance at Crown, bid 20-47, in the contract amount of $31,912.13 from 100, 430 to 142, 342 and 13. This funding is from the Crown Construction Fund.
Second.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves item A14. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I removed this from the consent agenda because I really think we need to look at this contract a little deeper. Not just thank you to the gentleman who came up and spoke, who also his business owns property here in the city. They have a warehouse here in the city. Christie, I don't want to disparage anyone or any company from the dais, so I will reserve comments. But I think we need to look a little deeper into Christie Weber Landscaping and see if we can't support another company, and particularly one, whether it's this gentleman or someone else who is local, would be great. And so I would love to vote this down and have us come back and look at this and maybe award this to another company, but if not, certainly hold it. Thank you.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I typically before every meeting I review the packet with our staff, and I did flag this one. However, City Manager or Director Stonebeck, correct me if I'm wrong, this has already been awarded, and this is a change order. So you want me to say that again? It's already been awarded to a contractee, and it's a change order. So it would make sense for the contractor who has started the work to complete the work and then guarantee the work versus switching. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that bid pack in front of me, sir, to know what the circumstances were way back then. So I would encourage you, as the chairperson of our MWEB, I'm always paying attention, to continue to reach out to our staff and bid on projects. I don't know if, Director, if you have any historical information, but at this point, it's already been bid out to someone, and I don't think we typically change in mid-service.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Dave Stonebeck, Public Works Director. Yes, Christie Weber already has a landscaping contract to perform work at the Crown Center. What this change order is for new work that was supposed to be completed by Booley and Andrews as part of the Robert Crown construction. Their initial landscaping for particular areas, the no-mow grass and just general turf grass throughout the site, did not take. As they originally installed it, their landscaping subcontractor isn't performing, isn't making the corrections needed. The city has withheld money from Booley and Andrews for that work, and to try to bring the landscaping up, we're seeking to add this new work to correct what Booley and Andrews didn't do properly and didn't repair under their punch list to get it done, and we're adding it to the contract of work that's already being performed by Booley Andrews, or I'm sorry, by Christie Weber at this site.
Thank you. Council Member Fleming.
So to that point, so what you're saying is Booley and Andrews work, their thing didn't work out that we paid them for. Christie Weber, was already on site, so you decided to give this piece of work to her too. Is that kind of
That
summing
is
it up?
correct.
Okay. But it's not, it's more of a convenience, but it's not outside the scope to say, we have this piece of work, Booley Andrews, did not complete it for whatever reason. We need a contractor. I realize it saves us time because she's already there or her company's already there, but it's not outside of the scope to have gone to look for another contractor, or to even call another contractor we use currently to see if they can do it. Or I know our greenways team has been very busy, so I'm imagining they could not have done it, but it's more of a convenience to give it to her versus.
It's because it's scattered throughout the site. It would be difficult to give it to somebody that's not already
On
there.
the site.
Yes, you are correct. Staff could have bid this work out separately as a total whole different bid project.
Okay, so not knowing this man, so I don't know what the contracts are, and I trust our staff to do that. I look at them when you bring me the scoring sheet and all those things. Again, kind of following, and I did look up. I was not familiar with this contractor. I did look it up, and not that Google is accurate, but there were a lot of things that I was not pleased with. So, if it goes forward, I can simply vote no at this time, but I would love for us to kind of just look at this contractor in particular for work going forward to see if their values align with ours as a city.
Absolutely.
Thank you. No one else who has not spoken yet is seeking recognition, so Councilmember Reed will speak a second time. You have 4 minutes left, Councilmember.
Thank you. And so thank you, Director Stoneback, for that explanation. Again, this is new work. It's $31,000. This isn't insignificant. This isn't an insignificant amount of money. I would love to support a local contractor or some other contractor whose values I would think align more with the values of the city of Evanston. Again, this is quite a bit of money, and if we can direct this to someone locally, that would be great. I don't think it would cause too much of a disruption to potentially look for another vendor for this. And maybe Director Stoneback, you can answer that question, what it might look like looking for a new vendor.
Oh, I guess I'm confused with direct it to a local business. If we were to bid this, we would bid it, and then they would have to meet the bid requirements, be the low bidder, and if it's an Evanston firm, be within 5% of the low bid. That's how we award projects. So we can go out to bid, but there's no guarantee that any Evanston landscape company will actually bid on this work. In fact, when we bid landscaping work, in the past, we have not gotten any Evanston landscaping companies actually bidding on this type of work. We were, because Booley and Andrews did not complete the work, and you can either do it this fall, and hopefully you would have new grass established next spring, or at this point, we would have to bid the project out, and then the work would be completed next spring instead of being established next spring. But that's city council decision. I'm just trying to make sure you understand. It was staff's intent to try to get it done this year, but whatever city council wants us to do, that's what we will do.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Well, Mr. Stoneback, while you're still standing there, how much staff time does it take to prepare and send out a bid?
Somewhere around 20 to 30 hours to prepare the bid.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
I'm sorry. I would.
You have spoken twice. Do you have something?
Yeah, I was allowing folks to speak. I do want to make a motion to hold this so we can have some time for, I think, if other council members were a bit more informed about this particular company, I think some folks might have a different opinion, so I'd love to have that opportunity to discuss this with other council members.
Right,
This is a significant amount of money, and if we do it, next year, I'd love. We can't guarantee that an Evanston-based landscaping business will apply, but I think we can almost guarantee that a company that better aligns with our values and that we, as the city of Evanston, should be supporting will likely apply for this.
Councilmember Nguyen?
I just want to say that we are obligated to follow a fair and objective bid process, and we fold into our bidding score extra points for Evanston businesses, minority women-owned businesses. So, and as a rule, we get the best quality work, not always, but the best quality work, and our staff always does a fair job on this. Obviously, all of us would like to have Evanston home-based businesses for all of our work, but we don't direct staff to award contracts towards any business, and I don't want any implication of that happening from towards our staff on this. The staff has told us that they have efficiently decided to get this job done. That was actually done by Bully and Andrews. It's just that the grass failed. So now this is a way of very efficiently completing the job during the same year that it was contracted out for. I think holding this is really unnecessary, and we should let the contractor, because this is a time of the essence type of issue. You got to get the landscaping done within a certain time.
Well,
So I would oppose a hold.
Okay, so there's been a motion to hold. Is there a second? Seeing no second, would the clerk please call the roll on the underlying motion made by Councilmember Braithwaite on item A14?
So I would not support going out for another bid process on this, but if there are some, I just want to be clear here. Are you saying there's concerns about this company?
Yes, it's beyond just hiring an Evanston-based company. It's about this. There are news articles that folks can Google. If you take 2 seconds to Google this company, there are a number of articles that I find concerning, that Councilmember Fleming expressed concern about when she did a Google, and it goes beyond just those articles. I've done some work in Chicago, and this is a very well-known Chicago landscaping firm, and so there are just a number of issues that I don't want to say from the dais without having some.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. Like I would afford this to anybody up here. If we have one of our colleagues that's saying they did some research and they have some concerns about a company, I think we should honor that. Again, I would not support bidding this out again, but if we can hold it and take some time to get this information.
So is that a second of the hold?
I will second the hold. I will.
So Councilmember Reed moves to hold A14. Councilmember Burns seconds. Does anyone move to overrule the hold?
I move to override the hold.
Councilmember Nguyen moves to override the hold. Is there a second? Second. Councilmember Revelle seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll on Councilmember Nguyen's motion to override the hold?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
No.
Councilmember Suffredin?
No.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye. Oh, I'm sorry. No, my mind's. No. Yes.
Councilmember Fleming?
No.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
On a vote of 4 voting in favor and 5 voting opposed, the motion to overrule the hold fails and item A14 is held. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion on item A24?
Members of the City Council, I'd like to move item A24, Resolution 88-R-21, City of Evanston, commitments concerning proposed 5th District for action.
Second.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves A24. Councilmember Reed? Seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
I don't know if Councilmember Burns wants to. This is A24, yeah. If you want to speak first and then.
No, you can speak to this one.
I was going to.
Yeah, just for the sake of
Okay,
time.
yeah. For the sake of time, I am going to move to hold this resolution. I think, we can adopt the ordinance and the resolution at the same time. I think there needs to be further conversation with the stakeholders here, District 65. I support many of the things within this resolution. One of the things that I'm uncomfortable with is the fact that we would bind ourselves in essence, to not use TIF dollars for a public school, which I could imagine being potentially one of the best uses of TIF dollars. And so I just would like to have, some opportunity to continue discussions with District 65 and with Councilmember Burns on this.
Councilmember Reed moves to hold item A24. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second, and it's just as a brief comment again, resolutions, as far as I understand, that they can be for action at the next meeting. So as Councilmember Reed said, instead of, passing the resolution before the ordinance, we can pass them all if there's support on the same day. So I just wanted to make that remark.
Okay. Councilmember Reed moves to hold item A24. Councilmember Burns seconds. Is there a motion to overrule the hold? Seeing none, the hold succeeds and item A24 is held. Two members turn their lights on to speak, but again, a hold is not a debatable motion. Is that correct? So those members can speak when this appears on our next regular council meeting. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion on item A25?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Ordinance 65-21 approving the tax increment redevelopment plan and project for 5/5 project area TIF number 9.
Second.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves item A25. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Kelly, followed by Reed.
So I think this is 25, 26, and 27. Again, I expressed some concerns during AP&W as a veteran public school teacher in Evanston for 30 years that I have some deep concerns about the impact of the proposed TIF and the resulting financial burden on our school districts. And I'd like to, we did get a letter from, we heard from the authorities, the school board, this evening, and I think we need to discuss this. I think it's a serious concern if we aren't entering into this in a partnership and understanding with commitments on both sides, given the impact on our school districts. So I am very concerned about this, and I'd like to know where are we in terms of potentially moving forward with a intergovernmental agreement with District 65. And if you'd like to address that.
Then I'll respond.
Okay, so a number of folks have their lights on, but with everyone's indulgence, I'd like to go to Councilmember Burns next to answer that question. This will count towards your time on the subject.
So just quickly, before or after the TIF public forum or meeting that was here, well, let me go back. So there was a joint review board hearing where representatives of all the taxing bodies were present. A vote was taken at that meeting to forward this along for a full council vote, and it was unanimous. And there was a representative from District 65 present, their CFO, at the meeting, and he voted in the affirmative to support moving this forward to us. Because I was unclear, this is my first TIF process, so I was unclear on how involved board members are at District 65 and 202 in TIF conversations, and so I reached out to district leadership, to be clear, to board president, vice president, and superintendent and assistant superintendents at both school districts to set up a meeting. We had a meeting with Mayor Biss was present, myself, Economic Development Manager Paul Zalmazak, and others. And during that discussion, an idea of an IGA surfaced. I know it was one of the options that was recommended by city staff, and we decided to move forward in that way. The challenge, it's not even a challenge. At this point, there were considerations that District 65 wanted us to make, and we have made those. But it is the opinion of Corporation Counsel that in this particular intergovernmental agreement that there should be considerations on both ends. And so we have, as they said, District 65 didn't have time to come back with some considerations on their end. This weekend, I was able to think of some, so I've proposed those, and we're waiting to hear back from them. But I want to be clear that again, if there's a sense that the city was unwilling to collaborate and work in a spirit of collaboration, it doesn't align with the fact that, again, I reached out as a city official and scheduled meetings with both school districts to have a discussion with them about how involved they were in this process and what they would like to see as in relation to this TIF. Mind you, after they already sent someone to the Joint Review Board hearing to vote to forward this along, right? So that's where we are now.
Council Member Reed, followed by Wynn and then Nusma.
I generally do not support TIF as a tool for economic development. I think that TIF throughout our state and particularly our area has been misappropriated and misused, and we've used, when I say we, I mean the collective we as the folks in the state have gone against what I believe the spirit of the TIF law is, which is that, tax increment financing dollars would be used to support a blighted community, to help raise property values and to create a strong both economic base in the community and to generate additional revenues for communities. But I will say with this particular TIF, I think this meets, if there was a TIF to meet the goals of TIF that are laid out in the state statute, I'd say that this TIF has potential to do that. I would have opposed almost every TIF that has come before this council, almost every TIF. But this is one that I think makes quite a bit of sense. I mean, the issue is still how the dollars are used. I commend both city staff and Alderman or Councilmember Burns for the community engagement that has come out of this. There have been a number of meetings and opportunities for folks to weigh in. But I do want to ensure that, once we pass this, it's really we have to really keep a close eye on how these dollars are spent. I would hate to see us follow the path that we have followed in the past, which is, handing out millions of dollars in subsidies to large developers. In my ward, there's the Howard, what used to be the Howard Ridge TIF, but it's been extended now. And we gave millions and millions of dollars to a wealthy developer that is operating out of Dallas, Texas. And, when we're talking about dollars that would be going to our schools, to our city, to our county, to our water reclamation district, those are important dollars that I do not think should be going to that. But with what is laid out in this particular TIF, if we keep to it, we'd be kind of flipping TIF on its head, and we'd be using these dollars to support residents here in Evanston through grants and monies and dollars for home improvements within their own community, or obviously within the TIF district. So I see this as a TIF that can meet the spirit of the law, and I think unless we can come up with a plan, I did the math, if the current proposal says the TIF could make up to 80 some odd $1 million over the next 23 years. Even if we did just half that, the council would have to come up with almost $2 million to match the investment that would be generated here. We'd have to come up with almost $2 million a year over the next 23 years and invest it in the Fifth Ward to match this kind of investment. And I think this makes perfect sense. So I certainly will be supporting the introduction of this to go to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Nguyen, followed by Nusma and then Ravel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to commend Councilmember Burns for his outreach on this issue and his leadership on this issue. I think TIFs have a very bad reputation, partly because of how badly Chicago has used TIFs. And unfortunately, that has left a stain on TIFs. Whereas in Evanston, we have used them very strategically and to our great advantage over and over again. So unfortunately, Chicago abuses the TIF ordinance, in my opinion, and Evanston actually quietly has used it very effectively. And I did want to point out that on the Main Street TIF, and I think we've talked about this before, we had a Citizens Advisory Committee that we formed as part of that TIF. We hadn't done that before in prior TIFs. It was very effective in terms of representing stakeholders and helping us direct the initial dollars and what the priorities should be. So I would recommend that you form a similar committee with this TIF as well. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that, and City Manager Storley can correct me on the exact time period, but this TIF ordinance was amended by the state legislature to include a formula so that that counted the number of school children within each TIFs, and this applies, and then for each school child that lives within the TIF, the school districts are reimbursed for that child. And it was to address specifically the issues of concern about schools not being able to benefit from the TIF increment. In addition, Evanston has a long track record of sharing our TIF revenue with 65 and 202, and we've been doing that for at least 15 years. So I am aware of the school issues. Not only did we, the city of Evanston took the initiative on this long before the state amended the law, but the state now has amended the law and addressed that. And so the schools are part of any TIF ordinance at this point. So I am very much in support of this TIF, and I think it will be very successful, and I think that it's an exciting TIF in terms of what it can do for the residents and the businesses and the community within it.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Nusma, followed by Ravel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My light was on to make one of the points that Councilmember Nguyen just made in support of a TIF Advisory Council, which I understand was part of the discussion earlier. And I think as we are attempting here in Evanston to do TIFs right, I think that's an important part of doing TIFs right. So I'm hoping that can be added to the resolution. I suppose would be the proper place for that to be added. I will echo Councilmember Reed's comments in the discussion on the resolution, the previous agenda item. It does not make sense to me that we would exclude TIF funds from being used for a Fifth Ward school. I'm not saying we for sure want to do that, but why preclude that possibility? There's broad consensus in the community that we would like to do a Fifth Ward school, and that will take all the tools at our community's disposal, and why not let TIF at least be one of the tools in the box? And again, echoing Councilmember Nguyen's comments, just to say thank you to Councilmember Burns for his leadership and the job he's done in engaging the various stakeholders in the community.
Thank you. Councilmember Ravel.
Well, in addition to acknowledging Councilmember Burns' outreach and engagement with the community, I really want to express my appreciation for the set of really thoughtful questions that you developed and asked Paul Zalmazak to answer for us in a wonderful, very helpful memo, I thought, in our packet that addressed a lot of the concerns that I think we've been hearing from residents. So I hope our listening audience has had a chance to really read through that memo and absorb that information. I too am really excited about this TIF. I think the residents in the TIF area can benefit from the improved infrastructure, the assistance with home repairs, job training, stronger neighborhood business districts, improved neighborhood amenities. And I don't know if our previous TIF documents for other TIFs have had such a specific list of targets for what the funds are going to be expended for. I really think gives me a lot of confidence that that the revenues are going to be used wisely, and we can't expect private investment to provide those funds. We really need the TIF district. So I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you. So, not to anyone's surprise, I have a different opinion, and this is not at all a knock on Councilmember Burns. I know he's been communicating and trying to move this along. However, I think we can't negate that there is skepticism in the community, whether that's based on Chicago's TIFs, people's lack of understanding of TIFs, a whole host of things. That's not to say every decision we make has to cater to that skepticism. But I think, coming into all the social unrest we've had, all the racial equity we talked about and not achieved on this council, the way in which, maybe for me personally, the reparations thing did not land well with a lot of black folks. I think to, compliment this is great and, have all the hopes that we want to have of this being a different kind of TIF. I think there is concern in the community, and I think it would be not genuine for us to say, hey, just trust us. You don't understand what we're trying to do. And I'm not saying that that's what you're doing at all, Bobby, but, as a council, right, to kind of talk about how great this is going to be without acknowledging that people have some skepticism for a variety of valid reasons and for varieties of unvalid reasons. And it would, I think, just add to the skepticism for us to just tell people how great this is going to be. And one thing I have concerns about that I've talked about, and I wish I would have realized, I thought A23 was part of this, is a lot of this TIF and a lot of the way that we're going forward to this TIF is about selling the Civic Center. And I can tell you I'm not wed to this building at all. I'm not, pro selling it, pro keeping it. It would just depend on the numbers for me. However, we know this community has lots of opinions about this building. And while I know we will have a very, lengthy dialogue about what we're going to do with this building, we are also moving forward with this TIF and setting it up so that if we sell the building, we can receive the increment, which is good financial planning, but we're also putting a little bit of the cart before the horse and then telling people we're not selling, there's going to be a huge process if we sell it. However, we're ready to sell it with this TIF. So I think we can't just negate that kind of elephant in the room by telling people this is going to be some world-renowned TIF. I think there also is a lot of fear about gentrification that we already know is happening. The TIF is laid out to do great things, but we also cannot say that because of this TIF there'll be no gentrification. I mean, that, again, is just kind of not true, right? There's already gentrification happening in the area because that's what happened in lower priced areas. So I know the TIF, Councilmember Burns is hoping this TIF slows that down and does a lot of great things that I also hope it does, but we can't just say and I'm not saying anyone said that, but kind of the sentiment in the community is this TIF is going to save black people and going to make them whole, which I would just say personally I find a little offensive. I find a lot offensive. So I think to kind of just roll with this narrative that this TIF is going to be the end-all be-all and keep black people in their homes is not necessarily accurate. And then just the last thing that I will say about the school thing, and I'm not on the school board, is if the school board does not want the money for the TIF, I don't know why we find such great offense in this and are trying to tell them what to do. We don't govern the schools. So even if this TIF were amazing and we put the first $10 million into making a school building, we do not have the authority to make a school. We could make a building, we could give them Family Focus, or not Family Focus, we can give them Fleetwood. We don't govern them. If they decide they don't have whatever they need to run the school, they are elected to run the school. So I think, whatever happens with the intergovernmental agreement and continuing conversations is great, but I think we should just be mindful that to say, why are we pulling the school out? The school is going to be great. Everybody wants a school. We are not elected to make those school decisions. So while I might want a school, or, Councilmember Newsma might want a school, we don't govern the schools. And so even if we wanted to give them a building to make the schools, we can't make them make a school. So I think just be mindful to kind of stay in our lane here. If Councilmember Burns is talking to them and they're going to figure out whatever they have to figure out, us giving judgment on where and when they open schools is not really our purview. Just like if we decide to sell or not sell this building, we're not going to go to them and ask them what their opinion is because they are not elected to govern this space. So I think my last thing is just about 23, even though it's pulled off and clearly I guess voted for it, is I do find it a little bit contradictory, I guess I will say, that we separated Ingram Park because the neighbors really wanted to keep a park regardless of what happened with this building and the other space. But when other residents have come and said, they don't like whatever or save whatever or whatever the case is, we're not as fast to act. So I think we all would be mindful to think about that. We've made an entire...
Your time is up,
Sorry.
Councilmember.
So I just think there's some contradictions we have to be more mindful of.
Yes, so seeing that no one who has not yet spoken is requesting to speak, we'll hear first from Councilmember Kelly for up to 4 minutes.
So first I want to say not all TIFs in Evanston have fulfilled their stated goals and missions. So I think to Councilmember Reed's point, the Howard TIF, was set out to make all homes, improve them, and this didn't do that. We got a development, I think, and some developers that made off very well who don't reside locally. So I don't think we can just say that Evanston's always done a great job with our TIFs. So we are also looking at that history. And yes, I think the outreach is wonderful, the community outreach, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, what I'm picking up is that there's resounding opposition to this. And I think it's one thing to do outreach, but not to actually then give that traction, and to just simply say we heard it and we did the outreach then is sort of making a joke of the outreach. I mean, if you do outreach and then you have this resounding opposition, then that has to be taken seriously and considered. And what I'm hearing is we did the outreach, but I feel like the residents, their voices and concerns are not being reflected as we move forward. And that's a tremendous concern. I hope this is a new city council that is really going to take into consideration residents' concerns, not just hear it. And Bobby, if you could just explain to me, and I do feel like there's a lot that's very unclear. There's a lot of what I feel there might be some lofty goals, but there's nothing, the real concreteness of it is lacking, and that's the big problem with TIFs. Again, a TIF that's small and very focused and directed, those are the ones that are successful. Such a huge, broad, this is an enormous TIF with general goals, and I think that means it's lacking tremendously in transparency, and this is a serious issue. And so I don't really understand how, and I still don't quite understand where we're at. I know you addressed it, but where we are at with an IGA with District 65. I mean, if you could clarify that, are you going to meet with the board to set up an IGA? I mean, I felt like that wasn't quite answered. So if you could explain that.
Yes, again,
I know they met on July 29th, right, where they discussed openly their expectation to negotiate. There was a meeting on the 29th of July, I think, to discuss that.
Yeah, so the city, and I say that carefully, understanding
just
that.
Hold on, just for my own timekeeping benefit. Oh, thank God it's not just me.
You're rubbing off on my stuff.
I mean, if you can just do it once, you'll be way ahead of me. Councilmember, is that the end of your? Okay. So the two remaining speakers are Councilmembers Burns and Reed. I'd be happy to give Councilmember Burns the last word if you want to go first, Councilmember Reed, or do you? I mean.
Yes, happy to go first.
All right, so you have 1 minute and 17 seconds.
Great. So I wanted to make one point, just to clarify. So while we do not govern District 65, Certainly, my only reason to want to take out the part of the resolution, and we're kind of past that now, but is to ensure that we don't tie our hands. To this particular TIF, I think that's the point I wanted to make, so I'll end there.
Thank you. And so our last speaker, unless the light comes on, is Councilmember Burns, who has 2 minutes and 11 seconds.
Yeah, so we're still, and when I say city, understand that it's myself and Paul Zalman's Corporation Council, like we're still at the table, and so we never left the table. We are open to an IGA. As I said before, I know for sure city staff recommended an IGA, maybe in agreement with some of the other members of the committee, but we recommended it. And so we're supportive of it if there's considerations on both ends. And so we're just waiting to hear back from the district about considerations that we propose, and happy to hear any considerations that they can come up with. So, I mean, that's where we are. As far as the lofty goals in concrete, I mean, that's kind of what the TIF, plan calls for, in the sense that it's a financing tool that is informed by City of Evanston plans. And so we heard Sue Loback say, hey, well, we need an affordable housing plan, and that's true. I think we do, and it'll take some time for this particular TIF to generate funds, and we should continue to plan, because those plans will inform how we use TIF revenue, the comprehensive plans, the affordable housing plans that we're going to create. Those should inform, or they're meant to inform, how TIF expenditures are made. The confusing part is, if you attended the meeting that I held at Fleetwood, you have some community members who say we've done enough planning, and we need to use our plans that I'm speaking for them now, that we adopted plans back in 2005, and we need to honor those plans. We've done enough planning, and they should be honored. And then you have other members like Sue, and I think also you, Councilman McKellar, who say we need new planning, around this. And so it's trying to find that balance. Do we need new planning to inform how we use TIF, or do we use the old ones, or is it a mixture of both? But TIF is meant to operate in that way. Resounding opposition, to me,
that's time. So if you could just wrap up, if you could.
I just want to speak to the resounding opposition that I'm not a leader who feels like it is appropriate to create clashes between community members. There's a lot of support for this TIF. There's a lot of concern about the TIF. What I can say is, and we can do this offline, I can name every single person that has stated an opposition, and I can show you in the TIF where we've included their concerns. The only thing that I can't include, is that I don't agree with TIF, right? With this particular TIF, I should say. That's it. That's what they want me to say at this point. But everything else, down to including a provision in the resolution that clearly states that we will use TIF funds to support small to mid-sized landlords who are providing naturally occurring affordable housing. I probably don't even have to say which community members that we hear from time and time again about that. You know what I mean? Like, I can point to it. Every single concern that we've heard, I've been able to get that from both town hall meetings that we've held here as a city, that I've held separately, one-on-one sessions, group meetings. We've had meetings around this as much as we can. We've included it. At this point, they want me to say I don't agree with the TIF, and I do.
All right. Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wen?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
No.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
On a vote of 6-3, item A25 passes and will be on our agenda on September 27th for action. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion on item A26?
Might I suggest
Mr. Mayor,
we
I
move
was just
both
going to
together?
suggest, and also members of City Council, I think we're tracking to get through this agenda. Just we have had a really robust debate, and I just want to remind members of council that this is for introduction, so with everyone's cooperation, I'd like to move item A26 and A27 together.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves items A26 and A27. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Revelle seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Kelly.
So I just want to say the fact that many residents simply don't want a TIF also, I think that's worth consideration. I don't know, that shouldn't be dismissed. There are a lot of problems with the TIF, and especially such a large one. I think just because you're saying, well, many of them just don't want a TIF, and that, but you'll incorporate any other, tweak it, but that you're not willing to contemplate and really understand the deep issues with the TIF. I mean, I personally think we should be figuring out our budget so that our budget and the ARPA money so that we're addressing these needs and not setting back our districts, our school districts, and our public services and everything else by redirecting tax dollars. So I just ask that you also consider, Councilmember Burns, the concerns about a TIF as a concept.
Just real quick.
Councilmember Burns.
So I think you misunderstood. So what I said is that I can literally name by first name and last name every single person who has reached out to me, who I've heard speak against TIF. And we've, in between the resolutions and the ordinances, we've addressed all of their concerns that I'm aware of. And I'm happy to take in more input, right? We can hold 10 more meetings if that would satisfy the members of the public. I'm happy to do it. I'm an organizer. I love it. What I'm saying is I have nothing else that I can take action on except to not support the TIF. So again, if you want to work with community members, I'm happy to work with you on this to figure out what other things they would like to see included to make this work. I'm happy to do it. But I have nothing else that I can take action on except for not supporting the TIF at this point. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
All right.
Councilmember Sufferton?
No.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
No.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
On a vote of 6-3, items A26 and A27 pass and will both appear on the September 27th City Council agenda for action. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion on item A24?
28, you mean?
Yes, I sure do.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I'd like to move for introduction item A28, an ordinance, 85-0-21, amending City Code Section 3-4-6 to add an additional L2 liquor license classification.
I'll second.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves item A28. Councilmember Newsma seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
I would like to see the license fee potentially reduced. And so I just want to reiterate that to have staff bring this back to the council or to have communication to see if we can make the licensing fee, we're in a somewhat of a sweet spot based on or I wouldn't say sweet spot. We're in somewhat of a decent place, I should say, given the research that Alderman Newsman and his intern have done. But I think if we really want to align with the goal of this here to make this something that's very available for smaller, more local retailers, I think there's the potential to get this the licensing fee down just a bit more.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. Councilmember Newsma, if the vote were to occur and this were to pass for introduction, would you be willing to negotiate during the course of the next couple of weeks to see about potential changes to the fee?
I'd be happy doing that. As long as we don't make it higher.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
On a vote of 9-0, item 828 passes and will be back for action on September 27th, potentially with an amendment negotiated between Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Nusma. There it is. Councilmember Nusma and Reed. This brings us to item 829. Councilmember Ravel, would you like to move suspension of the rules?
I move suspension of the rules. Do we want to do all the suspensions?
Yeah.
I move suspension of the rules for items A29, A30, A31, and A32.
Second?
Councilmember Ravel moves suspension of the rules for items 829, 30, 31, and 32 to allow for introduction and action on the September 13th City Council meeting. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
I think we should make this a standard practice. I'm happy to support this. I'm just curious why you're asking to suspend the rules.
For item A29 in particular?
Just the whole way through. Or if you want to, yeah.
Well, it seems to be our practice to suspend the rules and for four-way stop ordinances they never generate any controversy. And then in terms of the liquor license related issues, usually it's to help a restaurant get able to open sooner or to take care of discrepancies between the number of actual establishments in business. So it's kind of just our practice.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules on these four items?
So we're suspending the moves and passing, or we're suspending the moves, then going to vote individually? I think I lost that.
Well, I didn't know we were allowed to suspend the rules and pass at the same time, so this is just to suspend the rules, and then maybe if that passes, we could have someone make a single motion to do all four in a single roll call.
Fair enough.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
On a vote of 9-0, the motion passes and the rules are suspended. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion regarding items A29 through 32?
Yes, I'd like to move the following items, A29, 32. So really quick for the records, that's ordinance 86-021, amending the section 10-11-5D, Schedule VD of the Evanston City Code, four-way stops, Hartree and Payne. Item 30, ordinance 89-21, amending the City Code to increase the number of Class D liquor licenses from 60 to 61 for RD Pizza LLC, doing business as DeSalvo's Pizza on 1945 Central Street. And then the last item is the additional items are ordinance 91-0-21, amending the city code to increase the number of Class D liquor licenses from 61 to 62 for Evanston Pour, doing business as Evanston Pour, 528 Dempster Street. And then item 32, which is ordinance 90-0-21, amending the city code to increase the number of Class Q liquor licenses for 3 to 4 for 1815 Ridge LLC, Truly.
Councilmember Reed moves introduction and action of items A29, A30, A31, A32. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
That was Councilmember Braithwaite who moved all those.
And also requested for item 32.
I think he's referring to the suspension. I know Alderman Ravel and I look just alike, but
nearly identical. All right, will the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming,
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
On a vote of 9-0, these 4 items pass, and items A29, A30, A31, and A32 pass for both introduction and action. Councilmember Braithwaite, would you like to make a motion on item A33?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, member of City Council, I'd like to move item A33, ordinance 68-021, amending the City Code 1-17-4-2, the sale of real property. Staff's recommending City Council adoption of this ordinance, amending City Code Section 1-17-4-2, sale of real property, and this is for action.
Second.
And should I just go ahead and move the 34 as well?
No, we're going to skip that altogether. We only need one of the two.
Oh, got it.
So Councilmember Braithwaite moves item A33. I believe Councilmember Nguyen seconded. Is that right?
Yes.
And for discussion, Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I pulled this off. I want to say thank you to Manager Storley for helping incorporate some of the ideas that Councilmember Kelly and I had. I'm just wanted to get a bit of clarity from our Corporation Council as to I'm looking at page 604, paragraph number 3, and the subline section there. And so the change was that we get this published not just in a daily or weekly newspaper in general circulation, but we'd also get it published on the city's website. And I just want to be clear, if you have it up, Ms. Ozaribo, that the publishing on the city's website would also occur not less than 15, no more than 30. It seems as though that sentence could just apply to the news, to the posting in the newspaper, and I just want to make sure that applies also to the publishing on the city's website. And I guess while you're looking at that, if I can ask Manager Storley, I know that folks can sign up to receive email notifications for agendas and a whole host of things, but if you go to a particular, and maybe Luke Stowe, who maybe is gone now, might be better for this, but let's say this web page could, is there potential for a resident or myself or anyone to go to this particular web page and sign up to get updates if that web page is updated? So essentially you'd get an email alert if there's a plan to sell city property.
Yes, we could certainly set it up that way.
I don't know if that needs to be in the ordinance, but I would love to just guarantee that that's happening too. But and so, Ms. Ozaribo, I'm sorry, am I saying your?
Right, Ozaribo.
Okay. Yes.
What?
So so this is 68021. It's B.
B3.
3. Yes, B3.
Are you saying Councilman?
Yes. It's on page 604 of the packet. So I'll just, it says prior to adoption, the subsequent ordinance directing the sale of property, prior to adoption of the subsequent ordinance directing the sale of property, the notice of intent to sell said property as a result of a negotiated sale must be 1, published on the city's website, and 2, published at least once in a daily or weekly newspaper in general circulation in the city. The publication must not be less than 15, no more than 30 days before the date on which it is proposed to consider the adoption of such ordinance. So I just wanted to be clear. It seems as though that only applies to the publication in a newspaper, and I just want to make sure that that also applies to the publication on the city's website. And if it doesn't, I just want to move to.
It looks like it applies to both the website and the newspaper.
Yes, it does say published on the city's website. Okay, so as long as we're of the understanding that the website publication will also occur within the same time frame. That's all I wanted to be clear about.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
We'll come back to him. Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Aye. Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming? Aye. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Yes, okay.
And I vote yes.
Oh, Councilmember Nguyen, sorry.
On a vote of 9-0, item A33 passes. And we will, again, not entertain a motion on A34, which is duplicative. This brings us to our last item. Councilmember Nguyen, would you like to make a motion on item P3?
Yes, P3 is ordinance 75021, creating a provisional moratorium on the permitting and construction of new internal and attached non-owner occupied accessory dwelling units in the city. Plan Commission recommends approval by a 3-2 vote of ordinance 75021, creating a provisional moratorium on the permitting and construction of new non-owner occupied internal and attached accessory dwelling units, ADUs, to the Planning and Development Committee and the City Council. I move approval.
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen moves approval of item P3. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Our first discussion will be Councilmember Fleming, followed by Burns.
Yeah, thank you. So I pulled this off. I know the first time it was up, I heard the arguments of folks who have this issue in their ward and definitely don't want any absentee landlords and problems that they cause. However, upon, some reflection and actually talking to some people in my ward who are kind of in the process of looking at not only making them in their areas, but also, looking at some property possibly to buy and making an ADU there in which they would not live in. I am concerned about the vastness of it. This seems to be, at least from what was described, an issue around in you and with some neighbors, some homes and developers in that area. And I wish we could have, I don't think we can do that, but kind of make it zone specific. So anyway, I won't be supporting it tonight. However, my question is, I think there was a subcommittee made to address some other issues that this seems like it could fall under instead of just doing this kind of. Okay, Eleanor is telling me something, sorry.
All of these rental-related issues will be discussed by the subcommittee.
By that subcommittee, right. So I guess my and it's too late now, but I guess I would have loved for the subcommittee to work on these things before we did this moratorium so that they can be working on things and we can decide if the moratorium is the way to go or, kind of how to address it in a bigger breadth of work versus just having this moratorium now that stops all kind of construction in the city, so to speak, and then working on it and bringing something back. So anyway, I won't be supporting it tonight, but I do hope that some issues can be resolved for you all.
Thank you. The next speakers are going to be Councilmember Burns, followed by Reed, and then Braithwaite, and then Kelly.
I just wanted to acknowledge that I've had a lot of community members reach out about this issue. People are really troubled by the idea that we're going to place a moratorium on something that is meant to provide, in their opinions, a greater level of affordability and add much needed units to the community. And I want to be clear, and this is all in financial disclosure information. I'm founding board member of an accessory dwelling unit, and I say that, or accessory dwelling unit developer. And so I say that to say I do this with the understanding that ADUs are an important part of creating affordability in Evanston, and I do not intend to see any moratorium beyond 6 months. In addition to that, I would not support no longer allowing moving even beyond the moratorium, not allowing non-owner occupied internal attached ADUs, so I would not support that. For me, this is an acknowledgement that as is currently, that we, until we come up with plans to address the concerns that are largely stem from activity along in our northwestern area, that this is a good step so that we can spend the next 6 months in this committee that we've now approved in an earlier meeting or tonight, and we can correct those issues with our current policy, and then at the same time this moratorium would be lifted. So I just wanted to make my position very clear, and again, happy to answer any additional questions with community members offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reed, followed by Braithwaite, followed by Kelly.
I think I'm also not going to be voting for the moratorium tonight. I understand, the issues that folks, particularly in that corner that shared, corner of our city that shared with the 5th Ward and the 1st Ward, and in certain parts of the 7th Ward as well. I don't think that this policy directly and most effectively targets that issue, particularly as this would be new developments. And I think it's critically important that we allow for internal ADUs. And I think we can, and I'm happy that we have this subcommittee that will be looking at a whole host of issues that will help solve the target problem in that area that's shared with Northwestern students. But I'm going to be voting no on this. I think we should be promoting affordable housing. I'd love to see houses along the lakefront and houses that are far too big for the number of folks that are living in it be converted, whether again the owners of the house are living in it or not, be converted to create more affordable housing across the city. And internal ADUs are about the easiest route to get to that. Detached ADUs are another route, but I don't know if we should be holding this up, particularly since we just passed this ordinance not too long ago. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Braithwaite, followed by Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the conversation before. So there's not much that I can add. I'm definitely not in support of this for the arguments that we heard. This is an assault on affordable housing and the work that was done previously. The support for this was community-wide. And if you stand here and with all the conversation of affordable housing, this is the wrong approach and the wrong tool for the smaller issue that you're dealing with. And I think I think Robbie talked about this. We're just now starting to see momentum with this, with the applications. It really does send a bad message to anyone that would be a lender and any resident that has been a part of a pilot program to support this and the wonderful work that Dick Coe has started over the 2 years to get us to this point. I think if the reality is your issue with Northwestern and a couple of bad landlords, whatever, thank you so much, whatever that number is that you isolate it. And I think there's enough support on this council where we have not seen support with previous councils to adopt some additional tools. First of all, we've talked about landlord licensing. I think that is the proper tool to address the few homes that need to be addressed. I think that we have very good property standard laws to address the few landlords that you're having issues with. I think we also have nuisance premise that has never been used in the 10 years that I've been on city council, and I now have addressed some housing issues using that ordinance in 2 occasions with our staff that have absolutely nothing to do with hurting our affordable housing stock. The last thing that I'll say is, in Councilmember Kelly as well as Burns, you were at the Northwestern game. I had an opportunity to meet Anthony Kitschmeyer, who is I'm going to get this wrong, but he serves on student affairs, and he is the off-campus person at Northwestern who would be the best partner to sit and have a conversation. And I asked them on last Saturday, I'm like, have you had any conversations with any members of our city council? And he said no. So I can appreciate your advocacy on behalf of the neighbors that live in close proximity to those homes on campus, but you're taking the rest of the town over the cliff with holding this up. And I would appreciate, and I will stand and work with you, because all of these issues, not only does it help with bad landlords, but it does help to stabilize a neighborhood. And I would hope that you would reconsider your votes to oppose this, because we really need to move forward with this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councilmember Kelly, followed by Revelle, and then Nusma.
So I first want to say I'm really sorry. We spent long time discussing this at the Plan Commission, who voted to support this, and I know the word moratorium sounds harsh, but in fact, this is about affordability. And what we're seeing is that market rates are being distorted because of absentee landlords, and we're seeing this happen, and I know because of realtors in my ward who have absentee landlords chomping at the bit to redevise. And by the way, we can have, Alderman Reed, we can have internal ADUs. This is only for, please understand, this is a tiny sliver of the ADUs. This is for non-owner occupied internal ADUs. So they still exist. Like what the gentleman said, he can build an ADU for his parents. This isn't precluding any of that. For the majority of what internal ADUs are used for, the vast majority, this isn't going to impact that at all. And again, this is only temporary, the little sliver that we're even talking about. But what we're seeing right now is landlords that are going in. We stopped it quickly because we could see the writing on the wall to even undermine structures of houses, because that was a workaround in order to create, in essence, mini dorms where they could then charge upwards of $10,000 to $15,000 a month, and not only in the first ward up by the lake or in the 7th, but well into the 5th ward. I drove down streets, I was telling Alderman Burns, where there was almost entire streets now bought up and where the rents are become so high because of this. And this is what we're talking about. And I feel like right now there's a lot of political reaction, but not thoughtful. And I think we need to really understand, and that's why we have this subcommittee. And I would urge you all not to react just politically thinking, oh, we have to because I will say, listen to this. We have an absentee landlord in my ward who it has homes that are overoccupied, but he lives nearby. He has not created internal ADUs. He's done a beautiful job of maintaining his homes, and he has maybe 6 or more than 3 students, but he does a beautiful job. He hasn't destroyed the house and created internal ADUs in order to do workaround, but what he's doing is he's imposed a series of regulations and others that the neighbors aren't complaining. But what we're going to do by doing this, and they're lined up. I can tell you, several, real estate agents that live in my ward have these landlords just waiting to do this, and they're going to go in and create these secondary units in the houses in order to create these dorms, and the rents are up. Even the sale prices on homes right now are way over market rates, because of what they can collect monthly by creating these mini dorms. So I'm concerned that we're all reacting in a way, like I said, kind of politically, without really fully understanding the ramifications citywide on affordability. So that's why, Councilmember Fleming also, that's why we had to, put sort of a hold on this right now so we can figure out a way to adapt our ADU, as many states and cities have done, so that we in fact are encouraging affordability and not allowing this to in fact end up jacking up even higher rental rates and the sale prices on homes. So I think this is again very temporary and on a very, very tiny portion of what the ADUs are. And so I ask that you all consider that the impacts are not that the impacts against affordability are real. And we need to look at this, and I ask anybody to come and meet with us as we work through this, but that is my primary goal, is to protect affordability, because what we're seeing now in my ward is skyrocketing prices for rental and the sale of homes where they should be lower because of this. And we're seeing homes, again, even the structure of homes being undermined because it's a workaround, where I think we could have, more people living in a home that's not an ADU, doing it well, like we've seen with at least one absentee landlord who lives nearby in town and watches his homes. So I think we need to be creative and figure out how we can best meet Evanston needs for our students, who we will convene to the table. Dick Coe, I've spoken to him, and Sue Lulbach. We'll have everybody. We'll meet, convene all of the experts in the field to make sure we get this right for Evanston. So that's what we're looking to do over these next 6 months. So I hope you all reconsider, because once we do this, I guarantee you they're lined up, and we aren't going to be able to undo that, and the rates are going to go up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Revelle, followed by Nusma.
I'm going to echo a lot of what Councilmember Burns said. I, too, am a member of the Evanston Development Cooperative, so I'm strongly supportive of ADUs in Evanston. And secondly, I sincerely don't believe that at the end of our 6-month moratorium, at that point, I can't see myself supporting a continuation of this prohibition on non-owner occupied ADUs, internal or external or whatever, because I do think that kind of regulation would really hinder the development of ADUs. But my main goal in trying to figure out how to resolve the issue in the neighborhoods around the university is not only the student behavior issue, but it's more really what outside investors do to the market in those neighborhoods when they buy up the houses. They price them out of the range of middle income families. So, for example, in Councilmember Burns' ward, we've seen a neighborhood go from a ward that was a neighborhood that was made up of families owning and renting in that neighborhood, and now most of those houses are now taken over by outside investors and full of students. So we've taken a segment of housing out of the market for our middle income families, and so my reason to support a temporary 6-month moratorium is so we can come up with some mechanism for protecting those neighborhoods that are in the vicinity of Northwestern, and then we can move ahead and get rid of the moratorium and resume support for all kinds of ADUs.
Thank you. Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Full disclosure, I, too, am a member of the Evanston Development Co-op, so fully supportive of ADUs in general. And as I understand it, the intent of this proposed ban is, or moratorium, I should say, is a temporary fix to address an ongoing issue with student housing and student behavior in Northwestern, around Northwestern. I am of the opinion that the practical impact of this, of a proposed, of the temporary moratorium would not be that significant, either negative or positive. I'm looking at, the number of permits issued by the city for ADUs since August of last year. The city's issued 9 permits, 0 for internal ADUs. So I would tend to think that if there were developers lined up to do this kind of work that we seem to not want to do, that there would have been a run on the permit application process in the last few weeks in anticipation of a moratorium possibly being put in place. And so I don't see that happening. And I do, put a lot of faith into the experts that have testified in this case. So I am not going to be supporting a moratorium, but I do look forward to the discussion that's going to be had in the subcommittee to address the particular issue at hand here, as well as affordable housing more general. I do think there's a lot of work we need to do in an affordable housing plan, not just lofty goals, but a step-by-step plan on how we're going to meet the needs of the citizens of Evanston is something that I expect will come out of the subcommittee.
Thank you very much. Seeing that no one who has not yet spoken is seeking to speak, we'll go to Council Member Reed for a second time. You have 3 minutes and 20 seconds left.
Okay. So, one, just simple math. It looks like it does not have the votes to move forward. But I will say I have not seen data, and I'm happy to view it if Councilmember Kelly has it, but I have not seen data that shows that internal ADUs somehow decrease affordability. And I would love to see any research or data that shows this, because from my understanding and my research, particularly these internal ADUs could create missing middle housing, particularly if done in the right places and done well. It could create missing middle housing, which would actually increase affordability throughout Evanston, particularly if we can get folks who are, if we can create more space for lower income. I mean, I don't see internal ADUs creating necessarily low-income housing, but certainly more affordable and missing middle housing. And so, again, since it seems to not have the votes, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly has 15 seconds left.
Okay, so I just want to say, I agree. I think when we, as a subcommittee, that we have to figure out how these ADUs can meet our needs for affordability. But right now, what's going to happen is this workaround that's going to allow even more of this spread of the absentee landlords buying up homes to create mini dorms with exorbitantly high rate because of this, because they're now going to be allowed this workaround. And I think that's what nobody's quite, understanding, that we need to figure this out so that the ADUs do meet their intended purpose of creating affordable units. And right now, again, we're going to see it throughout Evanston that it's going to undermine this if we don't act soon. That's why we tried to act very quickly, because watch how this will fall like dominoes. This is what's going to happen. We're going to see. People even destroying the integrity of homes in order to create these internal units, because this is a workaround to be able to create mini dorms.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Point of order, we're voting on whether to extend
We're voting on the moratorium. So
Thank you. Let's try that again.
Okay.
10:25.
We're going to do it one more time. Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
no.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
I'm going to give it a nah, too.
Yes or no?
There was a no. Yeah.
Oh. Councilmember Fleming?
No.
Councilmember Kelly?
So, quick question. What happens with conflicts of interest? I know it won't change the vote, but when people do have a financial interest, as 3 members up here have said, I know it won't impact the vote, but that's
They
like,
usually
can you vote?
They usually recuse themselves, but that, I thought, if you had they have a financial interest, but they're technically voting against their interest.
Well, not all.
Well, okay.
No, 2 voted with their interest. So I'm just wondering how that works. I mean, are they?
Well,
are you
according to
supposed
our rules, you usually recuse yourself, correct?
I don't
Does
know.
the,
But
with
Tom
the
pulls
corp-
the-
I mean, like Jonathan
Would-
Newsma and.
Would the corporation,
There's-
would the Corporation Council want to weigh in on this question?
So you're asking, can members vote where there's a conflict of interest?
A financial conflict of interest, right?
Michelle, just for your reference, I'm sorry, Deputy City Attorney Orzaribo, this is already codified. This is a law that exists. So in the past, when this ordinance was passed, Councilmember Revelle did recuse herself. The issue now isn't to create something that doesn't exist. So when you give your opinion, that should be taken into context. Right now, the vote is to put a pass on something that exists for a temporary period, not to decide whether she should have it or not.
In my understanding, is the dollar amount that each member of the co-op has put in is limited to $1,000, just as an FYI.
Okay. So
Also, I'll point out that the EDC does not have a proposal under consideration. Their business model does not, as far as I understand it, contemplate internal ADUs. So Evanston Development Co-op is certainly playing an advocacy role for ADUs in general, but nothing particularly financially at stake for them.
So
With internal ADUs.
So let's hear from our Deputy Corporation Counsel.
So if possible, if I could just take a moment to review that part of the code.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Go ahead. We'll stand at ease while you do that.
Okay.
So, I mean, I do think it's, I mean, because they've come out, whatever it's called, the EDC has come out in, opposition to this moratorium. And if you have a financial interest in your support, I mean, I just think that there should be, if you're, taking their position and you have a financial interest, it seems to me that a recusal.
We are at 3 ayes and 5 noes pending Councilmember
Of
Kelly's
course,
vote.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly votes aye. So on a vote of 4 voting in favor and 5 voting against, item P3 does not pass. But I'm still very happy to stand at ease and hear from the Corporation Council about this question. I think, the question's been raised, and I would want everyone on the council to have the opportunity to hear an answer, if that would be helpful to them.
If you need additional time, we can prepare this response for tomorrow, Michelle. And also, I think Councilmember Newsma adequately explained that EDC is not in the business of attached ADUs, which is what this ordinance relates to.
Right. I mean,
They're about to get a lot of business.
Also, just point of,
okay. Go ahead, Deputy Corporation Counsel Orzaribo.
Sure. So I had a chance to review, and it would be my opinion that according to the code, that anyone with a financial interest or conflict of interest based on a financial interest in the vote would need to recuse themselves from the vote.
That would be everybody.
Well, I think.
No, not everybody.
I think Councilmember Newsma gave an explanation as to why membership in EDC does not constitute, in his view, a financial interest because they don't participate in the development of the type of ADUs for which there's a moratorium. Now, critically, as I understand it, we don't have a mechanism to adjudicate that question. I can tell there's a disagreement up here, but it's up to the council member to recuse themselves based upon their interpretation of the question of whether there's a conflict of interest. Is that correct?
point of order, just we do have a mechanism, and that's the Ethics Board.
No, I know, right, but we up here don't have a mechanism. And I guess we don't have an ethics board either, but that's a different conversation. Go Go ahead.
Sure. So, right, I would agree with you that as far as determining whether that person has a conflict of interest, that's true. The mechanism would be for that person to disclose it, and we would rely on that disclosure for them, and then for them to recuse themselves based on that.
Point of order. We do have a mechanism, and I just want to be clear so we know. The mechanism is that if we feel a member is acting outside of unethical, or they're acting outside of our rules, and not suggesting this is the case here, but we do have the power to remove them. If a member is here yelling and cursing, or they're voting, unethically, we have the power to remove a member temporarily for a meeting if they were to.
Okay, I would advocate against doing that.
I'm just saying that is a mechanism that we have at any moment if a member is disorderly, which
Okay.
I think that would be disorderly.
All right.
I'm just going to add one more thing, because we're just looking at the big picture. It takes 5 affirmative votes to pass an ordinance. Even if all 3 people recuse themselves, there's not enough votes for this to pass.
Councilmember Kelly?
No, I mean, that's what I had said originally, although I guess it's open to interpretation too, if you're voting in support of it, or if you're, I think in the case of Alderman Revelle and Burns, they're, acting thoughtfully and obviously going against what the corporation, the AD, whatever it's called, the Ditko's company is advocating very vocally for, and they will get a lot of business for. They do ADUs, Jonathan. Let's not pretend they don't. That is what they're in the business for. Currently, most of them are external, but they're about to get a lot of business for internal ADUs.
Can I make?
So I think we're, yes, I'll call on you, but I think we're getting into the territory of impugning one another's integrity up here, which is something that I always want us not to do. So go ahead, Councilmember Fleming.
I was just going to say, if maybe our corporation counsel, whoever wants to do this at whatever time, can get I hate to say a memo, but just send us an email reminding us of this rule, and when is the appropriate time for someone to make that recusal. I mean, we see council member Sufferton do it all the time, and I just think during the vote to bring up, when someone's voted whatever kind of way, should you recuse yourself, is probably not the time to do it. If we have a question about someone's connection, it's probably best to mention that before we sit up here to them personally, and then, they can explain what they're going to do. But I just feel like this conversation is not super productive, and maybe we can clarify some of these things before people sit down to vote. So regardless of how they vote, we understand what their connection is to any issue, and they can recuse themselves, and we can trust them to do that. And if they don't do that, then we can address that using any of the mechanisms available. But it doesn't become part of trying to sway people's vote on any issues.
All right, I agreed. Thank you. So just to close this out, Councilmember Newsma.
I appreciate what you said, Mr. Mayor, about impugning characters of our colleagues here. I will point out that I have recused myself from a vote that involved $200 to my wife's employer. And, had I felt that there was a financial obligation or financial implications to my vote on this issue, I certainly would have recused myself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I really appreciate that.
Call of the wards.
That brings us to call of the wards, beginning with Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your comments earlier regarding 2 of our pillars within the Black community, within the Black faith community that recently passed this weekend. Both Pastor Zali Webb, who I think was Saturday evening, followed by Patricia, Dr. Effiam, both who, as you indicated, were city staff members. So I just wanted to lift up that services for Dr. Patricia Effiam will be hosted at First Church of God Saturday, September 18th. Visitation is at 10 a.m., followed by the service at 11. And then for Pastor Zali Webb, his funeral services will be Thursday, September 23rd. Visitation at 10, service at 11, also at First Church. Also this Saturday, because of the hours of the services, we originally had a renaming ceremony for the Harbor Payne Park. I'm going to respectfully ask neighbors and also the families to push that to 3 p.m. and I'll make sure that it's noticed on the calendar, and we'll go out to my in my newsletter. That ends my report. Thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, would like to extend my sincere condolences to the families of Pastor Zolly Webb and Dr. Pat Effiam. I worked for 3 years with Dr. Effiam on the Equity and Empowerment Commission, and both her loss and Pastor Webb's loss are going to be significantly felt throughout the entire community. As you said, both of them were founding members of Evanston Own It, and Evanston won't be the same without both of them, and I think it's a sad loss for us as a whole community. I also want to offer my condolences to the family of Barbara Janes, who also passed away about the same time. You know, Barbara was an active member of this community in every possible way. I believe she was part of public comment during our last meeting in July
Yes,
or August.
she was.
Barbara was a really remarkable person. I've known her the entire time I've been on the city council as someone who regularly came, spoke to us, was very well informed, offered her opinion, constructive criticism. We need more Barbara Janes in our community. And two sort of small facts about her. I learned about 10 years ago that Barbara is one of this remarkable number of people, Evanstonians, who served in the Peace Corps. And as I learn more and more about the people here in Evanston who have served in the Peace Corps, they really all care deeply about their community. And that Dara Francelno told me the other night that Barbara Janes was her 7th grade science teacher at Haven. So, you know, really someone who, as a citizen, really committed themselves to the betterment of all of Evanston, and she will be missed quite a bit as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll join my colleagues in offering condolences and thoughts to the families of these valued community members. I also want to acknowledge that I am hearing from constituents in various portions of the 4th Ward that they are concerned about situations involving aggressive panhandling and some very uncivilized behavior, if not criminal behavior. So I want to acknowledge that I have heard those concerns and look forward to working with my colleagues and city staff to address these concerns.
Councilmember Burns.
Quickly to that point, while it's on my mind, we've had certain civil disputes or issues in the 5th Ward, and I found that our outreach workers do a really wonderful job at making contact with people and trying to correct behavior in a way that I think is in line with what we would like to see in terms of keeping the peace and in our approach to public safety. So I would recommend reach out to our outreach staff. And then we also have, partner organizations around the community that I think have outreach staff that can support. But please keep me updated with that. But I found our outreach workers to be really helpful with similar issues. I also wanted to send my deepest condolences to Barbara Zolly Webb and Dr. Effiam, Pastor Zolly Webb. All of them were just deeply committed to Evanston. And I think all of us up here, as well as the community members who we see frequent our city council meetings and committee members, understand just the sometimes physical and emotional toll that being that active causes, and they were all just deeply committed in many different areas of their life. And as Councilmember Nguyen said, I think this is a huge loss, certainly for their families and loved ones, but also for the city as a whole. And then also just wanted to thank Paul Zalmazak at the city, Mitzi Gibbs, Hitesh, Mayor Biss, our TIF consultants, Mary Rodino, CFO of District 202, as well as the community members who attended the TIF forum. We I structured it in a way where people with questions were prioritized in the beginning of the meeting, because although even I like to talk a lot and hear the sound of my own voice, it was important that the people who had questions that were unanswered were able to ask questions and get immediate responses from subject matter experts. And so I'm really proud that we were able to do that, and thank you to staff and the community that worked on it and came out. That is all. Thank you.
Councilmember Sefferden. Councilmember Revelle.
Well, I join my colleagues in expressing my condolences for the loss of Pastor Webb and Dr. Effiam and their leadership, in particular with Evanston Own It. I think that's been just really an important force in our community, and I know their leadership there will be greatly missed. And gosh, I've known Barbara Jane since my earliest days here in Evanston. She's always been such an active member of the community, and I was really dismayed to learn this evening of her passing, and my condolences to her family. On a different note, I just want to make Seventh Ward residents, remind Seventh Ward residents that I'm having a ward meeting a week from Wednesday, September 22nd. I had hoped that it would be an in-person meeting, but I'm thinking it really needs to be a virtual meeting. And it's going to feature an update from Audrey Niffenegger about the Artist Book House, and also from Charles Smith about Jens Jensen Gardens in Evanston, so people can learn how things are progressing over there at Harley Clark.
Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I want to let folks in the community know that today I was unable to make it, but we had a dedication in the 8th Ward at the Levy Center of the new Linden Room, so I encourage folks to make it out to the Levy Center, and so I want to thank the Levy Senior Center Foundation for the support that they have offered the city, and I'm looking forward to continuing to make progress in our 8th Ward's only community center. We will be having a ward meeting at the end of the month. We'll get that out fairly soon, so folks can be on the lookout for our ward newsletter. You can go to our city webpage to sign up for that newsletter, and information about our September ward meeting will be sent out soon, and it'll be available there. And then lastly, I'd like to offer my condolences to all of the Evanstonians that we've lost in the last few weeks, even extending it to the family of the young man that was the victim of homicide. I think the loss of any life in our community should be one that we mourn, and I'm hoping that we're offering that family the support that they need to get through what I imagine is an extremely rough time given the circumstances of the homicide, of any homicide. So thank you.
Councilmember Fleming.
Yeah, I'm also having a ward meeting on the 22nd. Hopefully everyone received the email. We postponed, but it was postponed due to the residents reminding me that it is a Jewish holiday this week. So sorry I did not have that on my radar, residents. But it will also be virtually, so please check your inbox for the email that went out, I think, just this morning. Also, just to echo what Councilmember Reed said, Pastor Zolly Webb, a big loss. I grew up right across the street from his church. And then Pastor Pat Ephraim, also a big loss. And I will say, to her credit, that she debated me. We debated long and hard about equity and the equity work that we were trying to do here in the city of Evanston. So even in our debates, she was very professional, and we, left those on good terms. But, she definitely stood her ground, which I always appreciate about someone. But also to Councilmember Reed's point, I just don't want us to forget about Mr. Butler, and regardless of the consequences of his loss of life and what people might feel about, or what the press might have read about, he also was a member of our community who had great potential, whose family is dealing with a great tragedy that hopefully none of us have to experience. And while we tend to highlight, and I know no one does this because they're trying to ignore other people, but while we tend to highlight those who are pillars or have done great work in our community, I do believe that we have to be super mindful, particularly of young people when they lose their life, and what have we done as a community, or what have we not done as a community that made people make certain choices that would put them in situations where their life could be ended so early. And I know, particularly for Mr. Webb, when one of his, I believe, nephews was killed, and a young man that he was fostering or had fostered before, he was a great advocate of young black men and trying to make sure they had all they needed to succeed in life. And so hopefully, as we are mourning his loss and remembering his work, we don't forget that part. And the young men who in our community, while we have a great community with lots of resources, everyone does not have the same opportunity to access those, and that we need to do all we can from this dais to make sure every student within our city boundaries does have access to all the great things about Evanston and all the supports they need. And if they do lose life early, that we don't make assumptions and cast them out as, others. So condolences to all, as Councilmember Reed, all who have lost their lives, the ones we knew from the dais and the ones we did not know. All loss is tragic here in our community.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes, so I'd like to echo Councilmember Reed and Fleming's comments, and yes, condolences to all, Pastor Webb, Effiam, and Mr. Butler. And yes, I think we should take pause to consider how we can further support our youth and increase our outreach in the city, our youth outreach, to ensure that our youth have fulfilled lives, long lives. But I'd like to take a special moment also to express my condolences to the family of Barbara Janes. I've known her for 50 years, and she was truly a neighborhood icon, always independent up until the end, and fighting for this community until the end. She was put community before self. I remember just about a month before she passed, I was down at the Northwestern Beach with her. We sat down at the beach and talked to the beach managers, and we were trying to figure out a way if we could just get a parcel of that for a dog beach. And she was wobbly then, but she was, determined to figure out a way that we can find that space for people and their dogs in Evanston. So she was, like I say, she was right there until the very end, trying to fight to improve this community for all Evanstonians, and especially the First Ward. And like I say, really an icon of our neighborhood. She will be dearly missed by her neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would entertain a motion.
I will make the motion to convene into executive session pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes, 120/2A. I move we convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel, real estate, and litigation. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act. These exceptions are 5 ILCS 120/2A, C1, C5, and C6.
I'll second. But should we include minutes? Are minutes not? Okay.
I don't believe so. So Councilmember Nusma moves that we resolve into executive session. Councilmember Reed seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Braithwaite. Aye. Councilmember Nguyen. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle. Aye. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
On a 9-0 vote, the motion carries, and at 10:47 p.m., the September 13th meeting of the Evanston City Council resolves into executive session to begin immediately.